It was my first week at the dispatch center. First week on the graveyard shift. I'd been warned that the nights were long, that the radio was a channel for desperation more than calls, and that fear had a way of slipping into the booth if you weren't careful. I didn't really understand what that meant at first. I thought fear was something you felt in short bursts, someone screaming in your ear, tires skidding on wet asphalt. But fear here, it moved slower. It crept under your skin, settled in your chest, and made your own heartbeat sound like a drum in a dark room. The night started like any other. The hum of the fluorescent lights above me, the constant murmur of the radios, the smell of coffee I hadn't drunk yet. My hands hovered over the console, trying to remember the procedure for logging calls and dispatching officers while the clock ticked closer to midnight. Then the line went live. Hello? The voice was faint, shaky, trembling, but not with the kind of fear you hear in movies. Real fear. I think someone's in the cemetery. My heart skipped a beat. I leaned forward instinctively, frowning at the panel. I had handled dozens of false alarms already, worried neighbors and prank calls. But something in her tone made my skin tighten. "Okay, ma'am," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Which cemetery are you at?" There was a pause. Long enough that I almost clicked off, but then she whispered, almost too quietly for me to hear. "Greenwood." "Please, you have to send someone." I typed in the location and hit the alert button. Officer McLean, our patrol guy for the night, would respond. Meanwhile, I stayed on the line, trying to reassure her. "It's okay. Help is on the way. Can you tell me what's happening?" I hear footsteps," she said, voice trembling again. "But no one's there." "I've checked. Her voice broke. I leaned closer. My stomach had this sudden tight feeling. I could almost hear the pause between each of her breaths over the line, and that pause was loud. "Miss, stay calm. Where exactly are you in the cemetery?" "I'm near the old section, by the stones with the names worn off." I could hear it now, soft, almost imperceptible. A shuffling noise behind her, or maybe it was in my head. My throat went dry. "Are you alone?" I asked. "Yes," she whispered, and the word was like glass cracking. I glanced at the monitor. Officer McLean's car was 3 minutes away. 3 minutes that felt like an eternity. "Okay, just stay on the line with me," I said, my own voice shaking now, despite trying not to let it. "Don't move. Don't turn around. Can you do that?" "Yes." I tried to focus on the console, on the buttons, on anything but the quiet static creeping into the line. And then I heard it. A low, dragging sound. Not like footsteps exactly. Something scraping, slow, deliberate. "Do you hear that?" I asked softly. There was a long silence on the other end. Then a quick, terrified whisper. "Yes, it's coming closer." I wanted to tell her it was probably an animal, a raccoon, or a stray dog. My rational mind scrambled for explanations, but the sound didn't fit. It didn't belong. It was deliberate. Human? Maybe not. And that realization made the hair on my neck stand on end. I could hear her breathing, rapid, shallow. And then she said something that made me freeze. "They know I'm here." "Who knows?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light, though my hands were clammy and my fingers trembling. She didn't answer. The line crackled and a low whisper slithered through. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like it wasn't her voice. The screen showed Officer McLean's location, blinking as he moved closer. I wanted to tell her to stay put, to keep quiet. But all I could do was stay on the line, listening to the dragging sounds, the whispering, the panic in her voice. They're watching me," she said finally. The words hit me like a punch. Watching, not following, not chasing, watching. That was worse somehow. I glanced around the empty booth. Just me. Just the humming fluorescent lights and the faint buzz of the monitors. And yet, I felt it. Eyes on me, somewhere, outside, maybe inside the city, maybe in the dark. Watching. I tried to focus. "Just keep calm. Officer McLean is almost there. Please. Hurry." Then the line went silent. Just static. Long, buzzing, unnerving static. I tapped the buttons, trying to reconnect. Nothing. Not even a click. Not even a beep. I felt a cold sweat break across my forehead. My stomach sank. Officer McLean's car pulled up on the screen just a few hundred feet from the cemetery entrance. I hit the radio, my voice tight. McLean, we have a possible intruder at Greenwood Cemetery. Female caller near the old stones. She reported someone watching her. Proceed with caution. There was a pause. Copy that, McLean said. I'm on it. I leaned back in my chair, trying to calm down. Trying to tell myself it was over. That it was just a frightened woman. Maybe a prank, maybe a ghost story made real by nerves. And then my phone buzzed. Not the dispatch phone. My personal cell. A text, no number, no name. Just a message, she's already here. I froze. The blood drained from my face. My fingers shook as I reached for the console. I tried the call again. Nothing. No ring, no click, just silence. I looked out the window. The parking lot was empty. Street lights flickered in the fog. I could feel it, though. A weight. Something heavy pressing on my chest. A presence that wasn't mine. And then faintly, over the static of the dispatcher line, I thought I heard a whisper. Not her voice. Something else. Cold, hollow, lingering. Don't turn around. I slammed the receiver down, my heart racing. My own voice echoed back at me in the booth. Don't turn around. I couldn't. I wouldn't. Not yet. Not until McLean got there. But even as I waited, I knew, somewhere in the shadows, something had already been watching. And I was next in line. The hum of the monitors felt deafening. The clock ticked closer to 1 a.m. The night stretched endlessly ahead. And I realized I hadn't even left the dispatch booth yet. But somehow, I was already in the cemetery. I didn't know if she was still alive. I didn't know what I had heard. And I couldn't shake the whisper that crawled into my ears, into my mind. They never leave once they've chosen you. I stayed frozen until the sound of McLean's footsteps approached the booth. And even then I didn't breathe, not fully. Not until he was close enough to see the terror in my eyes. And even then, I could still hear it, the dragging, the watching, the whisper. It was still out there, waiting. I never liked cemeteries at night. Something about them always felt wrong, like they weren't just resting places but traps. I've walked these grounds countless times during daylight, and even then the stones seemed to stare. At night it's worse. The shadows move differently. They breathe differently. And tonight, with the call still echoing in my head, it felt like the darkness itself was alive. I parked my cruiser at the edge of Greenwood Cemetery. The fog was thick, curling around the wrought iron gate like smoke from a dying fire. My flashlight barely cut through it, just a narrow beam that made the headstones flicker like ghosts in the mist. I stepped out, hand on my holster, feeling the cold bite through my gloves. Every instinct screamed at me that I wasn't alone. I called in on the radio. Dispatch, this is McLean. Arrived at Greenwood, beginning sweep of old section, over, static. Then the reply. Copy, McLean. Keep us updated. I started walking. The gravel crunched under my boots, loud in the still night. I scanned the stones, old names worn away by rain and time. The air smelled damp, earthy, and faintly metallic. I could hear the wind whispering through the trees, or maybe that was someone, or something, breathing near me. I paused at the first row of stones, noticing a slight disturbance in the dirt. Footprints? No, too irregular, too deep, like something dragged its feet, or didn't have feet at all. My stomach tightened. I shook my head. Just my nerves. The dispatcher said someone was scared. That's all. Then I saw it, a flicker in the corner of my vision. Something moving. Not fast, not running, just shifting. Between the stones, I froze. Hello? My voice sounded hollow, swallowed by the fog. Nothing. I took another step, and it happened again. A shadow, darker than the night, sliding between the headstones. I swung my flashlight toward it. Nothing. Just more stones, more fog, more silence. But I knew I wasn't imagining it. My pulse hammered in my ears, drowning out every other sound. I pressed forward slowly. The old section was ahead, where the stones were jagged, broken, some leaning like tired soldiers. That's where the caller said she was. That's where the feeling hit me hardest. Watching, waiting, like I was trespassing into someone else's world. I called out again, louder this time. Ma'am, are you here? Officer McLean, no answer. Just the whisper of the wind. And then, soft footsteps. Too light, too careful, not matching my own. They followed me not far, just behind, moving between stones. I spun, flashlight slicing through the fog. Nothing. I stepped carefully, trying to stay aware of every sound, every flicker of shadow. The moon broke through the clouds briefly, silvering the gravestones. And that's when I saw it. A figure. At first I thought it was the caller, but it didn't move right. Stiff, too tall. And its head. It tilted in a way that didn't feel human. The fog curled around it, hiding and revealing, hiding and revealing. My throat went dry. Hello? I called again, but my voice faltered. The figure didn't respond. It just waited. And then, slowly, it disappeared behind a cluster of stones. I swallowed hard and moved toward where I saw it vanish. My flashlight beam trembled with my hand. That's when I noticed the stones themselves. Names I didn't recognize, dates from decades ago, and some with no name at all. Just blank faces staring at me. One stone, almost hidden by weeds, had scratches. Deep clawed marks. Fresh. I froze. My mind raced. Nothing should be here. Nothing alive should be in this old section at this hour. And yet, something was here. Something watching. I called dispatch again. They're here. In the old section. I see movement. Not human, I don't. Static. A click. And then a faint whisper through the radio. Not on the frequency, not from dispatch. Something else. Something low, cold, like gravel being dragged across a stone floor. I gripped my flashlight harder. My heartbeat pounded in my chest. Every instinct told me to run, to get out. But I didn't. Not yet. I had a job to do. I had to find her. I moved deeper into the old section, the fog thickening, curling around my legs. The shadows shifted with it, stretching, twisting, elongating. I could swear something was following me, keeping pace, always at the edge of my vision. Then I heard it. A whisper, closer this time. Not words I recognized. Just a hiss. I spun again. Nothing. I realized I was shaking, my flashlight trembling so badly the beam wavered across the stones. My radio crackled. Another whisper. Closer. I swallowed. My voice was hoarse. Come on, ma'am, step out. Make yourself known. You're safe. Silence. Except for the whispers, growing louder, more insistent, echoing between the stones. And then, movement. Not far. A shadow slipping behind a leaning gravestone. I edged closer, flashlight cutting through the fog, and I saw her. At first, I thought it was relief washing over me. The woman from the call standing there, pale and trembling, clutching her coat. But the longer I looked, the more wrong it felt. Her head tilted at an impossible angle. Her eyes weren't right. Empty. Hollow. And yet she was looking at me. I stumbled back. My flashlight wavered. She didn't move, didn't breathe. Just watched. And then she was gone. I spun, searching the fog. Nothing. Just the stones. Just the shadows. And that's when I heard the footsteps again. Not hers. Something else. Behind me. Circling, careful, deliberate. I tried to call dispatch. My fingers fumbled over the buttons. Static. The radio hissed, distorted, like someone or something was speaking into it. Low, almost intelligent. Not words I could understand. Just intent. Malice. Watching. Waiting. I backed up slowly, trying to keep my eyes on the shadows. The fog shifted with them, hiding shapes, revealing shapes, playing tricks on my mind. Every instinct screamed to run. Every rational thought told me I should have left minutes ago. But I couldn't. Not yet. And then I saw movement in the corner of my eye again. Something shifting between the stones. Faster this time. Closer. I raised my flashlight, heart hammering. Nothing. But I could feel it. Something close. Too close, breathing. Watching, I whispered to myself, trying to steady my voice. It's just shadows. Just shadows? You're fine. And the fog whispered back. Not in words, but in feeling. Cold. Watching. Alive. I realized then that the cemetery wasn't just quiet. It was waiting. The stones, the shadows, the whispers. They were patient. They had all the time in the world, and I was just another visitor. I called dispatch one last time before retreating toward my car. Dispatch? I don't know what's here. I'm heading back. It's not safe. There was no reply. Only the static, stretching, alive. As I walked, I kept glancing over my shoulder. Every few steps, a shadow flickered where none should be. Every few breaths, a whisper lingered in the fog. The old section of Greenwood Cemetery swallowed sound and light and reason, and I knew, even as I left, that it hadn't let go of me. I didn't stop until I reached my cruiser. Every nerve in my body screamed, every instinct telling me I had just brushed against something that didn't belong to this world. I sat behind the wheel, hands trembling, trying to catch my breath, and I realized I hadn't just seen shadows among the stones. I had felt them move, felt them watch, felt them waiting. I started the engine, radio crackling with static once more. The cemetery disappeared in the rearview mirror, but the feeling didn't. Not in the darkness. Not in the silence. Not in the fog that now followed me everywhere I went. I didn't sleep that night. Not a wink. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the stones, the shadows, and her face, or what I thought was her face, tilting at that impossible angle. And every time I tried to convince myself it was imagination, I heard it. Footsteps, always just behind me. It started as a whisper. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, some leftover echo from that night at Greenwood Cemetery. But then it wasn't. I was alone in the dispatch booth, coffee long gone cold, the fluorescent lights flickering faintly above me. My fingers hovered over the console, trying to focus on the routine calls. Noise complaints, minor accidents, lost pets. Routine, ordinary, safe. And then the phone rang. The number was unrecognizable. No area code, just a string of digits I'd never seen before. I hesitated, the same cold feeling curling in my stomach from the first call. But I answered. Hello? Nothing. Just the faintest sound of static. Then a soft whisper so low I had to lean in. Hello. I froze. The voice was familiar. Too familiar, ma'am? I asked cautiously. Silence, and then a faint rustling, like someone moving through leaves or dragging something across gravel. My hands trembled. I know you're listening, the voice said, almost directly in my ear. I swallowed hard, trying to maintain composure. My pulse pounded so loud I was sure she or whatever could hear it. Who is this? I asked, my voice barely steady. No answer. Only the faint, deliberate dragging sound again. I stood up and leaned over the console, staring at the monitor. The call was coming from a local exchange, the same area code as Greenwood. I felt a chill. Stay calm, I whispered to myself. It's probably someone messing with the lines. A prank, that's all, but I knew it wasn't a prank. Not this time. Not when the dragging sound seemed synchronized with my own heartbeat, like it was moving closer whenever I paused. I traced the line, trying to locate the signal, but it was like it disappeared into the static itself. The voice came again, soft, chilling. They're following you. I dropped the receiver, my fingers fumbling. My stomach turned. I couldn't tell if it was fear or disbelief or both. I tried calling back. Nothing. Just static. I walked around the booth telling myself it was a glitch, a technical error. But every time I moved, I felt it. Footsteps. Slow, careful, deliberate. Always behind me. Always out of sight. I stopped. Held my breath. Nothing. Then my chair creaked. Not mine. Someone or something shifted in it just behind me. I spun. Empty booth. Monitors humming. My own heartbeat deafening. I leaned against the counter, trying to calm myself. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe the Greenwood call had broken me more than I realized. But the line rang again. Same unrecognizable number. I froze. Hello? Nothing at first. Then the whisper, closer this time, urgent. Do you see me? I wanted to hang up. I wanted to run. But I couldn't. Something rooted me in place. A combination of fear and curiosity I didn't understand. I don't know what you mean, I stammered. Look behind you, the voice said softly. My skin crawled. I spun slowly, every muscle tense, flashlight in my pocket from the previous night now useless in the dimly lit booth. Nothing. The hallway behind me was empty. Just lockers, filing cabinets, and the cold, humming fluorescent lights. I sat back down, trembling. My hands shook over the console. I tried the line again. Silence. Then a drag. like the faint scraping of feet over concrete, followed by a whisper almost too soft to hear. "You can't hide." I felt my chest tighten. Something pressed in around me like the walls of the booth had grown taller, closer. My mind raced. I tried rationalizing prank call, coincidence, lingering fear, but it didn't fit. The voice, the dragging, the whispers, they were synchronized with my own presence. The line rang again. I couldn't resist. I answered. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded, voice trembling. The whisper came instantly, sharp and cutting. "Because you listened." And then silence. The static lingered in my ears even after I put the receiver down. My chair creaked again, slowly, softly. Behind me, I couldn't turn around. I knew I couldn't. But the feeling pressed harder now, like ice crawling up my spine, fingers gripping my nerves. I tried to call dispatch, hoping for reassurance. But the radio only buzzed with low whispers, distorted and hollow. It wasn't the dispatcher on the other end. Not human. Something else. Something patient. Footsteps again. Behind me. Close. Matching my own pace as I moved toward the door. I walked faster. They sped up, always behind me. I tried to run. The dragging matched my sprint, relentless. I burst into the hallway, heart pounding, gasping. The building was empty. I knew it was empty, but the sound persisted. Every step, every breath, every heartbeat, I could hear it mimicked behind me. I stumbled into the stairwell, clutching the railing. My own footsteps rang hollowly on the concrete, and yet I could hear another set. Quieter, slower, deliberate, following, watching. I reached the bottom and tried the front door, locked. Not unusual, but now it felt like a trap. I spun, flashlight finally in hand, scanning the shadows. Nothing. I could hear whispers now, low and urgent, weaving around the air like smoke. Not words I recognized, just sounds. Intent, malice, watching, waiting. I pressed myself against the wall, trembling, trying to catch my breath. The dragging sound stopped. Silence. My pulse raced so loud I was sure it would echo in the empty building. Then a soft whisper, right at my ear. "You hear it too, don't you?" I jerked back. No one. Empty hallway. I ran to the door again, fumbling with the lock. My hands shook, heart hammering. And then I saw it, or thought I did, a shadow moving just outside the frosted glass. Watching me, waiting, too tall, too still. Not human, not real, and yet undeniably present. I yanked the door open, bolting into the parking lot. My cruiser was just where I left it, but the fog had rolled in thick, curling around the building like smoke. The shadow didn't move, but I knew it was there, somewhere, waiting for me. I climbed in, locked the doors, and started the engine. Radio crackled again. The whisper came through, distorted and hollow. "You can't escape." I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, breathing shallow. The lot was empty, the night silent, and yet every instinct told me it wasn't empty. The footsteps began again, soft, careful, deliberate, around the car, just out of sight. My pulse raced so fast I thought I'd pass out. I glanced in the rearview mirror, fog curling like smoke, shadows stretching and moving just beyond visibility. I wanted to drive. I wanted to escape, but every time I put the key in the ignition, I felt it. Watching, waiting. The whispering came again, soft and insistent, threading into my mind. "You can't hide." "You're next." I drove anyway, fast, too fast. The streetlights blurred past, fog swirling in the headlights. But in the corners of my vision, I saw movement, shadows slipping between parked cars, twisting around trees, always just out of reach. Always following. I tried to tell myself it was stress, fear, my mind playing tricks. But I knew it wasn't. I could feel it in my bones, under my skin. Following, waiting, patient. I pulled over near a gas station, shaking, trying to collect myself. My hands were cold, numb, and my breath came in ragged gasps. The whispering stopped. For a moment, nothing. Silence, relief. And then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The same string of digits as before. I stared at it, frozen. I knew I shouldn't answer. But I did. "Hello?" Soft, almost gentle this time, but no less terrifying. I'm closer now. I dropped the phone, hands shaking. The whisper followed me through the air, threading into my ears, threading into my mind. Footsteps outside the car, always behind me, watching, waiting. I didn't sleep that night, not a wink. Every sound, every shadow, every whisper felt alive. And I knew deep down it wasn't going away. Not ever. Some things follow. Not for minutes, not for hours. But for days, weeks, years. Patient, unseen, relentless. And I had let one of them into my life. It was a week after the first call. A week of whispers, footsteps, and the constant gnawing feeling that I wasn't alone, even when I was. I had tried to convince myself it was all in my head. The dispatcher said I looked exhausted. My partner didn't know what to say. Everyone told me to take a break, but I couldn't. I couldn't stop listening, couldn't stop waiting, and then the phone rang again. Same number, same voice. Hello? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Hello? She sounded different, softer, distant, fragile. Ma'am? I asked cautiously. I'm lost, she whispered. I don't know where I am. Something in her voice made my stomach twist. Fear? Desperation? Both. I tried to calm myself. Maybe she really was just in trouble. Maybe she wasn't. Whatever had haunted me for the last week. Okay, I said. I'll help. Can you tell me where you are? I'm not sure, she said. I walked, and now I'm somewhere I don't recognize. But I can hear it, always. A shiver ran down my spine. I knew that tone. That quiet, resigned panic. That sound in her voice that said she knew she wasn't alone. Listen to me, I said, voice firmer now. Stay calm. Try to describe what's around you. Are there lights? Buildings? There was a pause. Then a soft, eerie laugh. No, only shadows, stones, fog. I froze. Greenwood Cemetery. But she had disappeared or moved. Or something had taken her beyond the edge of maps and streets. I tried the dispatch console, the city maps, tracing her signal. Nothing. No cell tower, no GPS, no clue. It was as if the number existed in another layer of reality. Ma'am, I need you to stay calm. Can you move to a safe place? Silence. Then a whisper, closer than before, almost inside my head. They never leave. I pressed the speakerphone, thinking maybe she could hear me better. Who? Who's there? I asked. Static answered. Then a voice, familiar and yet impossible, almost like hers. Don't come. I felt my stomach drop. Not just fear this time. Something deeper. Something primal. The kind of fear that clings to your bones. I tried calling her back, tracing, reconnecting. The line clicked. Static. And then whispers. Not her voice. Hundreds of voices, low and overlapping, undistinguishable, but familiar. They never existed, one hissed. My hands shook and I dropped the receiver. The office felt colder. The fluorescent lights flickered and hummed, and I realized I could still hear her, somewhere beyond the static. Somewhere. Inside the building, maybe inside me. I stood pacing, trying to make sense of it. Every wall, every monitor, every empty hallway seemed alive. The shadows stretched longer than they should, curling around corners, lingering at the edges of my vision. The phone buzzed again. Same number. Same voice, but fading, distant, almost sad. I'm gone, she whispered. I tried to call back. Nothing. Just static, and then that whispering again. Low, chilling, almost patient. You shouldn't have listened. I sank into my chair. My hands covered my face. The voices whispered, circling me, threading into my thoughts. I could feel them pressing into my ears, into my skin, into my mind. They weren't just sounds. They were presence, watching, waiting, judging. I remembered the first call. The dragging sounds, the eyes watching through the fog, the impossible angles of her head. And I understood, finally, that she hadn't existed in the way I thought she had. She was a witness, yes, and I had been the witness now. Footsteps, close, around me. Not human, not real, and yet undeniable. Following, circling, always. I tried to leave. The door, my escape, seemed further away. Shadows twisted, moved, curling into corners. Whispers grew louder, overlapping into a roar inside my skull. I called dispatch one last time, voice trembling, almost breaking. She's gone. I can't The static cut me off. Then silence. Longer than before. Heavy, dense, impossible to ignore, and then I heard it clearly. The whispering, not through the phone, not through the radio. "Through me! You're next!" I bolted, running down the hallway. My office was empty. Nothing moved except the shadows. They stretched, elongated, reached toward me. I could feel them. Cold fingers brushing against my arms, my face curling into my hair. I stumbled outside, gasping for air. The night was still. The city lights distant. No fog, no sound. And yet I felt it. The weight. The watching. The patience. I ran to my car. Locking the doors, I tried to start the engine. My hands shook uncontrollably, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed, and then I saw it. The number on my phone. The same untraceable number. And next to it, a message. I never left. I dropped the phone. My headlights cut through the empty parking lot. No one, no shadow, nothing alive. But the whispers continued. Faint at first, then louder, threading through the air. Words I didn't recognize, voices I shouldn't hear. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I realized then that the woman, the caller, wasn't real. Never had been. Not really. She was a phantom, a lure. And now the attention had turned to me. The dispatcher's console crackled to life. Static, whispers, low, insistent, patient. "We see you." I backed away. Every shadow around the building seemed to move closer. The fog, faintly curling at the edges of the parking lot, thickened unnaturally, as if it had a life of its own. I ran. I didn't know where, just out into the streets, headlights cutting through mist and darkness. The whispers followed. Footsteps behind me that didn't match mine. Watching, patient, endless. I stopped near the bridge. The city lights below, the river black and still. And there, nothing moved. Nothing breathed. Only the whispers, faint but growing. Threading into my thoughts, I realized something terrifying. She had never called for help. She had called to mark me, to draw me in, and now I was the witness. The fog drifted closer. I could hear her voice again, softer this time, almost a sigh. "You're part of it now." I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but there was nowhere to run. The shadows, the whispers, the dragging, every corner, every space was waiting, patient, relentless, infinite. I sank to my knees on the bridge, gasping. The city below, distant, indifferent. The fog curling up around me, dense and heavy like it wanted to swallow me whole. The whispers circled my mind. "We never leave." And neither do they. I realized then that I didn't need to see her to know she was gone, because she never had been here in any real sense, only in the space between worlds, between fear and memory. And now, I wasn't alone either. Not ever. The footsteps began again, close, surrounding, inside. I closed my eyes, gasping, heart hammering, and I felt it, watching, patient, waiting. The weight of unseen eyes pressing down deep into my chest, threading into my bones, and I understood finally. Some calls are not meant to be answered. Some witnesses never escape. I didn't move. I couldn't move. The whispers wrapped around me, curling into my mind. The shadows pressed closer. The dragging sound, slow and deliberate, grew louder, closer, always closer. And somewhere, far away yet impossibly near, her voice, soft, hollow, distant, whispered again. "You should have never answered." The city lights flickered. The fog swallowed the bridge. The whispers became all I could hear, all I could feel, and then silence. I don't know how long I stayed there. Minutes, hours, days? Time lost meaning. I was part of the whispers now, part of the shadows, part of the waiting, and the line, that cursed number, blinked silently on my phone. Untraceable, patient, eternal. I am still listening. The rain hadn't let up all night. It hammered against the windshield, a relentless drumming that made the streets slick and empty. I'd been on routine patrol, my flashlight cutting through the murk of the cemetery gates. Normally this place was quiet, dead quiet. Even the wind seemed to tiptoe over the gravestones. But tonight, something was off. A call had come in around 10. Faint crying, or at least that's what the complainants swore they'd heard, coming from the old mausoleum at the far end of the cemetery. The mausoleum had been sealed for decades. No visitors, no caretakers, just stone and iron and the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. I don't know why exactly I agreed to check it out. Habit, maybe. Or maybe it was the curiosity that cops like me can't shake, the one that whispers. Go see for yourself. I parked the cruiser a few yards away, leaving the engine running because the rain was cold enough to seep through my jacket. The gravel crunched under my boots as I approached the mausoleum. I swear the deeper I got, the more the night seemed to swallow the sound of the rain. It was muffled somehow, like the darkness itself had ears and was pressing against my eardrums. The mausoleum loomed ahead. Its doors were iron, rusted shut, the hinges frozen in time. I ran my fingers over the wet metal. My flashlight flickered. I cursed under my breath. Batteries were new. Must be the rain. Then I heard it, a sound so faint it could have been the wind, or a child. But no, I knew the difference. Crying, thin, broken, like someone whispering for help. My stomach turned, and I felt a pulse of heat run up my spine. The sound seemed to echo inside me, bouncing off the wet stones and through the mist that clung to my uniform. I checked the doors again. Locked. No way in without tools. I pulled out my radio, trying to calm the trembling in my hands. "Dispatch, this is Officer Grant. I'm at the mausoleum on West End. I'm hearing..." The words caught in my throat. The crying stopped. Just like that. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd imagined it. But the cold air seemed heavier now, more pressing, like the darkness was waiting for me to blink. I could feel it against my skin, against my mind. I circled the mausoleum, tapping at the walls, tracing the cracks in the stone with my fingers. That's when I noticed something. The rainwater had pooled in a shallow depression in the grass, reflecting the faint light of my flashlight. And in the reflection, I swear I saw a face. A child's face, pale, eyes wide, mouth open, and then it was gone. Just gone, as if the water had never held anything. My breathing hitched. I took a step back, heart hammering. Rationally, I told myself it was my reflection, my own fear twisting in the dark. But the feeling lingered. The way the air seemed to hum around me. The way my stomach nodded as if warning me not to stay. I fumbled for the lock with my tools, but then the crying returned. Louder this time, closer. It wasn't coming from outside. I could hear it inside the stone walls. I shouldn't have, but I leaned my ear against the cold metal. It was soft, broken, terrified, and then I heard the whisper beneath it. Low, dry, like dust scratching across stone. "Come in," I stumbled back, shaking my head. "There's no way. The mausoleum is sealed, locked, empty." I reminded myself of that. My pulse slowed a little, but the whispering persisted, repeating, "Come in, come in." My flashlight flickered again, and in that instant, I thought I saw the door shift. Just a fraction. Just enough to make me think it could open. My rational mind screamed at me. This is metal, rusted for 50 years. It can't move. But still, I stepped closer. The crying stopped. Silence pressed in so thick I could hear my own heartbeat. I reached for the door again, hand trembling. And then, I swear I felt it. A tap, light, quick, against my shoulder. Not hard, just a touch. Cold as ice. And gone. I spun around empty. Nothing but the rain and the smell of wet stone. My flashlight wavered, casting shadows that looked like arms reaching for me. I shook my head, trying to clear it. I'm a cop. I've seen drunkards in alleys, fights gone bad, screams that curdled the blood. This is nothing, just wind, just rain, just something. I tapped the door with the butt of my flashlight. Metal rang hollow, and the whisper came again. Closer this time, urgent. "Help, please?" And then the air changed. The rain slowed, but the mist thickened, curling around my boots, around the edges of my flashlight's beam. Shapes flickered in the fog. Just out of reach, I thought I saw a small hand pressed to the inside of the glass on the mausoleum doors. A little girl's hand, pale, wet, trembling. But when I blinked, nothing. Just stone and shadow. I stepped back, pulling my radio from my belt. "Dispatch," I said, voice tight. There's something here." "I don't know." Static. Then silence. The radio crackled and died. "Battery dead?" "I don't know." I dropped it. That's when I heard the footsteps. Slow, shuffling, not mine, not human. And yet, there was no one there. I spun, flashlight cutting arcs through the darkness, heart hammering. Mist wrapped around my ankles, my knees, and I felt it trying to pull me forward. Towards the door, I wanted to run. My brain screamed at me to leave, to call for backup, to forget this whole stupid assignment. But my feet didn't move. My hands clutched the flashlight like a lifeline. And then I saw it. A small shadow slipping between the gravestones. Moving against the wind, against the rain, I took a step back. My flashlight hit the door again, and there it was, the figure, pale. So pale it seemed carved from moonlight. A child, no more than 7, standing at the base of the door, eyes wide, hollow, staring straight at me. And in a voice I could barely hear over my own heartbeat, it whispered, "Help me." I stumbled back, nearly falling into the mud. My mind raced. This isn't real. It can't be real. But every instinct, every fiber in my body screamed otherwise. And then just as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. The shadow, the figure, the crying. The mausoleum was silent again. Just stone and rust and rain. I sank to my knees, mud soaking through my pants. I tried to think clearly. Report this? Leave it alone? Get tools to break in? None of it made sense. And yet, in the pit of my stomach, I knew I couldn't leave. Not yet. Not while someone, was trapped in there, calling my name without words. The rain fell harder, drumming against the mausoleum, against my shoulders, against the hollow of my chest. And I realized, whatever was inside, whatever was crying in the dark, it wasn't going to stop. Not until I listened, not until I opened that door. I pulled the crowbar from my belt. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold it. I pressed it against the lock. Rust flaked onto my gloves. And then, a scream. Sharp, ear-splitting. Not the child. Not human. Something deep. Ancient. Angry. It rattled the air, the stone, the night itself. My ears rang. I fell to my knees again, covering my head. When I dared to look, the door hadn't moved. Nothing had. Except the crying. Fainter now, but persistent. Coming from somewhere inside me. Inside the night. Inside the cold, wet air that refused to leave. I don't know how long I sat there, shivering and listening. Rain dripping into my eyes, my ears ringing with that otherworldly scream and the soft, broken sound of a child's crying. Part of me wanted to run, wanted to leave, wanted to tell myself it was all in my head. But another part, the part that had become a cop, the part that couldn't ignore a call for help, whispered, "I have to see this through." So I stood, mud caking my boots, rain soaking my uniform, hands raw on the crowbar. And I looked at the mausoleum, the sealed, silent stone tomb, and I whispered back into the night, "I'm coming in." And the crying stopped. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the whisper returned, almost inside my ear this time, cold, hungry. "Come in." I took a step forward. I stepped closer to the mausoleum, crowbar in hand, and the air seemed to thicken around me. Every breath I took felt wet, heavy, like the night itself was pressing down on my chest. I told myself I was being careful, logical, just a cop doing a job. But logic was hard to hold on to when the shadows moved in ways they shouldn't, when every raindrop hitting stone sounded like a whisper. The door didn't budge. Rusted metal that had held firm for decades refused to give. I slammed the crowbar against the lock again. The sound rang loud, hollow. And then the touch. It was light at first, almost hesitant. Cold, ice cold, creeping down the back of my neck. My skin prickled. I spun around, flashlight slicing through the mist and rain. Nothing. Empty cemetery. Gravestones leaning in the fog, trees bending under the wind, and the mausoleum staring at me with its sealed mouth. I shook my head. Maybe it was just the rain dripping from the eaves. Maybe my gloves brushing my jacket. But then it came again. A pressure. A weight settling on my shoulder, steady and unyielding. My heart slammed against my ribs and my knees weakened. I could feel the cold seep through my uniform, clawing past fabric and muscle, reaching straight into bone. I whirled again. Still nothing. Empty night. My mind tried to make sense of it. Wind? Rain? A branch? But the pressure moved with me when I twisted. I stepped back, and it stepped back. I took a deep breath and tried to laugh, a sharp, nervous sound that bounced off the stones. I'm imagining this. I wasn't. I could feel it again, cold, deliberate, climbing over my shoulder and down my arm. I yelped, wrenching my arm free, but the air itself felt thick, pushing me forward, nudging me toward the door. I stumbled, catching myself against a gravestone. The crowbar slipped from my fingers, clattering into the mud. The hands, or the weight, vanished, leaving only the echo of ice in my blood. I sank to my knees and tried to steady my shaking hands. My flashlight trembled. The mausoleum loomed, silent, unyielding. Yet inside I could hear it, faint scratching. Not crying this time. Scratching, scraping, something trying to move behind the stone, behind the metal, and every so often, a whisper. "Come in." I forced myself to stand. My boots squelched in the mud. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to run, to call it off and never look back. But the thing on my shoulder, the weight, the cold, had planted something in me. A pull, a hunger. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run. But at the same time, I wanted to step forward. I wanted to answer the whisper, see what was inside. I picked up the crowbar again, hands shaking, and pressed it against the lock. My reflection in a puddle caught my eye, pale, wet, eyes wide, heart hammering, and then it moved. Behind me, just a flicker. A shadow, maybe, or maybe a person. I spun, flashlight swinging. Nothing, but I felt it again. Hands, 2 of them this time. Cold, icy, running over my shoulders down my arms. Fingers brushing against my neck. The touch was so real I could feel the sting where it pressed. I wanted to scream, to yank away, but my feet wouldn't move. My knees refused to bend. My body froze under their invisible weight. I told myself, it's not real. It's a trick. My mind. Fatigue. Fear. But the cold ran deeper than thought. It crawled along my spine. My teeth chattered. My flashlight caught the edge of something white and wet slipping behind the mausoleum door. A shadow or a child? I couldn't tell. The whispers became louder, urgent, insistent. Come in now. Every word scraped across my skull, echoing in the hollow spaces behind my eyes. And the hands, always the hands, guided me forward, pressing me against the door, nudging my chest, curling around my wrists. They were patient, deliberate, pulling me closer to the sealed stone. I dropped the crowbar again, shaking. My flashlight rolled in the mud, casting long, jittering shadows that looked alive. My mind screamed at me to leave, to run, but I couldn't. I was rooted, held by invisible fingers. And then, there it was. Not a shadow, not a shape, but a face. Pale, wet, small, pressed against the inside of the glass panel on the mausoleum door. Eyes wide, black, hollow, mouth open. Screaming silently, I gasped. The hands vanished instantly, leaving me trembling, soaked, heart hammering in the dark. The face lingered. I could see it in the puddles, in the wet stones, in the shimmer of my flashlight. Every instinct screamed, "Don't touch! Don't go near!" But something inside me, a terrible, stubborn need, drove me forward. I pressed my hand against the door. Cold. Solid. The face moved away, and for a moment I thought I'd imagined it. But then the whisper returned, right beside my ear, icy and wet. "Help me." I jumped back, hitting a gravestone. Pain shot through my shoulder. The air thickened. I could feel it all around me now, the cold, the mist, the hands that were gone but still present in memory. Every breath I took felt like inhaling frost. My chest ached. My teeth chattered. And then I heard something new. Footsteps, shuffling, not my own, coming from the side of the mausoleum, circling me, slow, patient, waiting. I spun with my flashlight, but the mist swallowed everything. Just shadows, just fog, just wet, silent stone. I told myself, leave, just leave. I backed up, my boots sinking into mud, flashlight trembling. And that's when I felt the hands again. Not on my shoulders this time, but my waist, my back, my chest. Guiding me, pushing me, nudging me toward the door. The whispers became screams, urgent, demanding. Help me!" I screamed back at the night, voice cracking. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. And then I realized something. Something I didn't want to admit. The hands weren't trying to hurt me. Not really. They wanted me inside. The rain slowed, the mist thickened, curling around me. Shapes flickered in the fog. Small shadows moving like children. Faces glimmering in the wet darkness. And every step I took toward the mausoleum felt both like surrender and salvation. I looked down at my hands. Mud-caked, shaking. The crowbar lay useless in the mud. I had no choice but to push the doors myself. I pressed my palms against the iron. Ice seeped into my fingers. I pushed. Rust flaked. Metal groaned, but the door wouldn't budge. And then I felt it, again, 2 hands on my shoulders. Cold, icy, insistent. Guiding me, steadying me. I realized I was trembling uncontrollably. My teeth chattered. My mind screamed. My body wanted to run, to flee, to forget, but the hands wouldn't let me. They pressed me forward, and I understood in that terrible moment that whatever lived inside wanted me to open the door. I tried to pull away. The hands tightened. I felt fingers curl against my chest, my arms. I couldn't see them. I couldn't fight them. I was alone and yet not. I was wet, mud-soaked, shivering, and completely in their grasp. And then a whisper, right in my ear, bone deep. "It's waiting." I staggered forward, pressed my hands against the iron again. My breath hitched. My heartbeat roared. The hands, icy and invisible, pushed me, guided me, demanded I finish what I started. I don't know how long I struggled, how long I screamed at nothing, how long I listened to whispers, cries, scratching behind stone. But something inside me had changed. Fear was no longer enough. Logic was gone. Only the pull remained, the invisible hands pressing me toward the sealed door and the small, desperate voice begging me to enter. I gritted my teeth, pressed my palms harder, and then I felt the lock give. Just a fraction. Enough. The hands withdrew instantly, leaving me trembling, soaked, heart hammering, facing the doorway that had been sealed for decades. The mist rolled in, curling over my boots. Shapes flickered in the shadows. The crying returned, faint, broken, pleading. And I realized, whatever waited inside, it was patient, and it had been waiting for me. I swallowed hard, teeth chattering, and whispered to the night, "I'm coming in." The door finally gave way with a groan that sounded more like a scream. I stumbled inside, coughing, the cold, wet mist from outside curling into the darkness like it wanted to follow me. The air smelled of damp stone, dust, and something else. Something rotten, metallic. My flashlight shook in my hands, its beam cutting jagged paths across the interior. The mausoleum was empty, and yet it wasn't. The walls were lined with niches, each sealed with small marble plaques, names carved decades ago. I could feel the presence before I could see it. Cold, patient, watching, waiting. The whispers were faint now, a chorus of broken, desperate voices circling the stone. Here, help." I took a tentative step forward. My boots echoed against the floor, wet and slick. I forced myself to breathe, to think. There's nothing here. Just stone, just dust, just echoes of the dead, and yet I knew I wasn't alone. The mist that had followed me in outside now slithered along the floor, curling around my ankles, brushing my knees. It moved almost like water, alive and deliberate. Shapes flickered in it, faces, pale, wet, twisting in and out of sight, children, adults, some familiar, some not. All staring, watching, judging. I blinked, and in the reflection of a marble plaque, I saw my own face, pale, wet, eyes wide with terror, and behind it, another face, ghostly, fleeting, pressing against the glass as if it had just been inside me. I stumbled back, hitting the wall. My flashlight wavered. I tried to speak, but my voice failed me. The mist thickened. Faces pressed in from every direction, coming out of nowhere, fading before I could get a clear look. Eyes hollow, mouths open in silent screams. I felt their gaze pierce my skull. Their whispers scratched at my ears. "Come closer. Look, help." I wanted to run, wanted to shove through the door and back into the rain. But the moment I thought about it, the mist shifted, forming a corridor guiding me deeper. Cold fingers brushed my arms again, gentle this time, insistent. I realized they weren't trying to hurt me. They wanted me to see, to witness. My flashlight caught a figure in the corner, small, pale, soaked in mist. A child, mouth open in a silent cry, eyes black, hollow, and then, for a second, I saw dozens more. Faces layered on top of each other, writhing, screaming, pleading. I shut my eyes. When I opened them, they were closer. Too close. Surrounding me. Floating just inches away. I staggered, trying to back up. My hands brushed the stone walls, leaving wet prints. Every step made the fog swirl around me, shapes twisted in impossible ways. I swear one face looked like my own mother, long dead. Another, a stranger I couldn't place, eyes wide with terror. All of them staring, accusing, begging. The whispers grew louder, overlapping. A chorus of sorrow and despair that vibrated through my chest, rattling my bones. Help, please. Don't leave. Stay. My ears bled with it. My hands shook so violently the flashlight skittered across the floor, rolling and casting wild shadows that danced in the fog. Then I saw it. At the far end of the mausoleum, the air shimmered. A figure, tall, pale, featureless. But every face in the fog seemed to bend toward it, converge on it. The whispers stopped for a heartbeat, leaving only a heavy silence, thick and suffocating. And then, a low, dry laugh. Not human, not child, just ancient. I tried to speak, but my voice cracked. My throat burned. The mist swirled faster, forming hundreds of small faces, all pressing in at once. They moved as one, like water, like smoke, like living shadows. The child from the corner ran past me, dissolving into fog as it moved. Help, please, it whispered again. I stumbled backward, nearly falling over a niche. My hand scraped against the stone, leaving streaks of mud and rainwater. The featureless figure moved closer, silent, gliding over the floor. The faces in the mist pressed even harder, brushing against me, staring through me, pulling at memories I didn't want to recall. And then I saw it. My own face reflected in the marble, pale, wet, eyes wide. But it wasn't just me. Every expression of fear, every shadow of panic, every lost memory seemed layered over my own. And the whispers, now they were inside my head. Come, join, stay, forget, remember. I tried to back away, but the mist was everywhere now, curling around my legs, rising to my chest. Faces appeared in the fog, then vanished, replaced by others. I tried to grab something solid, anything, but my hands passed through it. Stone became mist. Mist became air. My own body felt unreal, hollow. The fog pressed against me, cold, demanding, insistent. I wanted to scream, but the sound got caught in my throat. I felt the cold hands again, brushing my shoulders, my neck, my back, guiding me forward, not pushing, not harming, leading me. And I realized with a sick, sinking certainty, they weren't just guiding me, they were waiting for me to see. The featureless figure stopped at the center of the mausoleum. Mist swirled around it, faces spinning in impossible spirals. I took a step forward. My legs wobbled. My chest heaved. The whispers grew louder, screaming inside my skull. See! Understand. Remember, stay. I forced myself to look at the figure. And as I did, the fog parted for a moment. Hundreds of faces pressed toward me, contorted, screaming, laughing, crying. Each one told a story. Pain, loss, regret. Memories I didn't recognize but felt deep in my bones. And in the center, a small hand, pale, wet, reaching toward me. I wanted to retreat. I wanted to run. But the hand touched mine before I could move. Cold as ice, hollow as the grave. And in that instant, everything shifted. I saw flashes. Moments of life, death, despair. Children lost, mothers crying, fathers screaming, strangers wandering, forgotten, abandoned. Every face in the fog was a memory. Every whisper, a fragment of existence clawing to be remembered. I fell to my knees. The fog pressed against me, faces swirling, voices overlapping, memories breaking apart and reforming. And then I understood. This was what had been calling me all along. Not just the child, not just the mausoleum, the entire place. Every lost soul, every forgotten memory trapped in the fog, waiting for someone to witness, to acknowledge, to carry their echoes. The featureless figure extended a hand. I reached out. My fingers brushed the air, Cold, wet, solid for a heartbeat, then gone. The faces pressed in closer, eyes wide, mouths open in silent screams and pleas. And I realized I was part of it now. Part of the memory, part of the fog, part of the endless cycle. I don't remember screaming. I don't remember falling. I just felt myself pulled forward, drawn into the swirling faces, the fog, the endless echoes of the forgotten. And in that moment I knew some things aren't meant to be found. Some cries aren't meant to be answered, and yet, here I was, answering anyway. The mausoleum doors outside were still closed. Rain pattered against the stone, mist curling over the gravestones. And inside, the fog waited. Patient, eternal. Faces flickering, whispering, pressing in from every direction. Remember us. Don't forget. Help us. I don't know if anyone found my radio in the mud. I don't know if anyone ever saw me leave. I don't know if I even exist outside the fog anymore. All I know is the faces, the whispers, the cold hands that guided me deeper, that pressed me to witness, to understand, to stay. And sometimes, when the mist rolls over the cemetery at night, I hear them. The whispers, the crying, the laughter. And I remember that night, the mausoleum, the fog, the faces. And I wonder how many others will hear them too, because once the fog finds you, it never lets go. I didn't mean to be awake at this hour. Patrol shifts don't usually get this late, not unless there's a call that makes you shift uneasily in your seat, the kind that leaves the radio crackling in the silence of your own thoughts. I remember leaning back in the worn vinyl seat of my cruiser, staring at the dashboard lights, trying to convince myself it was just another quiet night. But then it came. A voice, sharp, panicked, fracturing through the static like glass breaking. Officer. Please, someone's trapped. Cemetery? The words tumbled out in broken gasps. My hand tightened around the steering wheel, knuckles white. The cemetery wasn't close, but it wasn't far either. Long enough that I had time to feel that knot in my stomach settle into something heavier. Something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I muttered into the radio, my own voice sounding foreign in the empty car. Say again? Who's trapped? Location? Silence. Just the low hum of the engine and the faint whistle of wind through the cracked window. Then the voice again, barely more than a whisper, yet sharp enough to send a chill crawling down my spine. Please, please, don't leave me here, near the stones. I swallowed hard. My patrol instincts kicked in. The routine training that drilled into me over years of walking quiet streets, of chasing shadows and listening to the small, tremulous calls that others ignored. I grabbed my flashlight, the beam weak but steady, like a trembling finger pointing at the darkness. The ride there was slower than usual, though my foot pressed harder on the gas than I cared to admit. The streets were empty, the streetlights flickering as if nervous, their halos failing to reach the cracks in the asphalt. I passed houses whose windows were dark, some with curtains twitching at my presence, and I imagined them watching, judging as though they already knew the stories that wouldn't leave my mind tonight. The cemetery came into view like a cold wave, black iron gates rising against the night sky. The wind shifted as I parked, rattling the cruiser and carrying the faintest scent of earth and decay. It wasn't unusual to smell soil in a cemetery, but tonight it carried something else, something sour, like a memory I couldn't quite place but knew I should fear. I stepped out, the gravel crunching under my boots, my flashlight cutting a narrow path through the darkness. The gates were open, slightly ajar, swaying with a whisper that seemed to beckon me forward. I wanted to pause to call for backup, but something in the frantic pleading of that voice refused patience. Hello, I called, my voice small in the vastness of gravestones. Anyone there? Officer Davis, silence answered. Then faintly a sound, like a shuffle, careful and hesitant, moving between rows. My heart thudded against my ribs. I forced myself to take steady steps, the beam of the flashlight slicing through fog that seemed to gather just ahead, as if the night itself were pressing closer. I passed graves older than memory, headstones chipped and worn by rain and time, names I couldn't read, dates that blurred into one another. My mind, always sensitive to the strange weight of such places, tried to push forward, tried to focus on the task. Someone was trapped here, somewhere in this grid of stone markers, and it was my job to find them. The path forked, and I followed the narrower trail, the one that seemed less worn. Something about the air here felt heavier, as if the space itself was pressing down on me. My flashlight caught movement, just a flicker, but it was enough. I spun, trained hand on holster, expecting the ordinary. A fox, maybe, or a stray cat. But there was nothing. Nothing but the silence, dense and waiting. Then I heard it again, the voice. This time closer, yet impossibly distant, as if it were drifting from beneath the soil itself. Please, hurry, I froze. The words were fragile, fractured, but human, real. My fingers trembled slightly as I aimed the light between the graves, and that's when I noticed something I hadn't before. The footprints, shallow, small, half-buried in the loose soil, leading further into the cemetery, winding between stones as though whoever, or whatever, had been moving in deliberate circles, trying to confuse anyone who followed. I followed them anyway, each step measured, careful not to disturb the quiet that seemed sacred and hostile all at once. My radio sat in the pocket of my jacket, silent now. No response, no crackle, just the static echoing in my mind like a metronome. The further I walked, the colder it got. Not the kind of cold that comes from night air, but the kind that seeps into your bones, settling there, whispering doubts, dredging up memories of mistakes I thought I'd left behind. I thought of my first call years ago, how I'd stumbled into a dark alley chasing a report that turned out to be nothing. The humiliation, the fear, it seemed to cling to me here. I reached a section where the stones were close together, their shadows stretching long and grotesque in the beam of my flashlight. That's when I noticed something else, movement. Not of flesh, not exactly, but of shadow, a flicker across the ground at the edges of my vision. I spun the light around, heart hammering, but saw nothing. The cemetery was silent, empty, and yet, wrong! The voice came again, stronger this time, urgent and raw. Help me! They're watching! I called back, but my voice sounded absurdly small. Who's watching? Where are you? No reply, only the shifting shadows among the stones. And then something new, a smell. Not decay, not earth, but iron, blood. My stomach twisted. I forced myself to focus, scanning every grave, every shadowed nook, my flashlight trembling in my hands, and then I saw it. A figure crouched low, pressed against the side of a tombstone. Small, indistinct, human enough that my stomach unclenched, only for my relief to be replaced by unease. The figure turned slightly, face obscured, whispering something I couldn't catch. My breath fogged in the cold night, and for a moment I thought I saw the mouth move in perfect mimicry of my own voice. I stepped forward. It's okay, I'm here to help. Stay where you are. No response. Only the quiet shift of gravel under unseen weight, the distant creak of a gate swinging in the wind. I reached the figure and the light finally caught them. Not a person, not alive, not exactly, but a motionless body draped in tattered clothing, eyes wide, staring. Empty, hollow, yet somehow accusing. I froze, my mind scrambling. Was this a trap, a prank, or something else entirely? I called into the radio again, louder this time, urgency slicing through the static. Unit 5 to dispatch. Trapped person located. Need immediate backup, static. Only static. The voice returned then, whispering from nowhere and everywhere, wrapping around my thoughts like smoke. You shouldn't be here. My flashlight flickered. A gust of wind, or maybe something more deliberate, swept through the rows, and I saw shadows stretch, bend, coalesce, not like anything natural. The figure I had approached seemed to blur at the edges, edges that wavered and whispered with every heartbeat. I took a step back. Dispatch! Respond! My voice broke. The radio was dead, nothing but silence and that whispering tone that seemed to mimic me, repeat my own panic. The figure moved then, not in steps, but in a glide, closer to me despite the space between us. The shadows along the stones shifted in tandem, elongating, connecting, as if the entire cemetery were leaning in, watching, waiting. I felt the weight of countless eyes, some imagined, some not, pressing down on my chest. I gripped my flashlight tighter, shining it directly at the figure. Its face was now clear, pale, impossibly thin, lips moving in sync with the whispers of my own thoughts. "You shouldn't have come?" My knees weakened. I thought of turning back, of racing to the car, of abandoning protocol entirely. But the voice, the desperate, fractured voice, cut through the dread, threading fear with urgency. "Please, help me," I swallowed. I nodded, even though no one could see me. I took a step forward, and the cemetery exhaled. The cemetery felt different after that first encounter. I thought I'd been prepared for night calls, for the unknown, but there's a difference between darkness you expect and darkness that waits for you like it has purpose. My boots crunched along the gravel paths, the flashlight's beam bouncing over jagged headstones, over the patches of earth that seemed freshly turned. I could still feel the weight of those eyes, the hollows of that figure staring into me, burning some quiet truth into my memory. I wasn't alone, I realized too late. The lanterns, old, wrought iron posts with glass panes meant to light the paths, were broken, shattered, the glass scattering across the soil like glitter, catching the flashlight in wicked flashes. I stepped carefully, aware of every crackle underfoot, trying to make sense of it. They weren't knocked down by accident, not by wind or animals. Someone had been here. Someone, or something, had moved through this graveyard in a deliberate, patient way, leaving me alone with fragments of light and shadow. I crouched near the first post, brushing shards aside. My fingers trembled, not just from cold, but from a creeping, gnawing fear. There was a pattern, almost imperceptible at first. The broken lanterns were not random. They followed the curves of the main path, yet some led into the narrower trails, into corners where the gravestones leaned over like they were whispering secrets. It was like the cemetery itself had been rearranged while I wasn't looking, creating corridors and dead ends meant to confuse or trap. I rose, scanning the darkness ahead. My flashlight's beam wavered. I felt watched. The kind of watch that isn't about eyes, not really, but about consciousness, about the understanding that every step I take is noted and perhaps anticipated. My hand hovered over my holster and I cursed myself for it. I didn't even know if it would do any good. The voice came again, fragmented, almost playful this time. "You can't see me." I stopped, the beam cutting across an empty stretch of graves. Nothing. Only the shattered lanterns, their iron frames twisted like gnarled fingers. My stomach tightened. My mind, ever alert to the tricks of night, filled in shapes, dark forms lurking at the edge of vision. But when I turned, they dissolved into shadow. I was alone, but somehow entirely surrounded. I tried the radio. "Dispatch, do you copy? Officer Davis at the cemetery. Repeat. Backup needed." Nothing. Dead. Just static that whispered back at me in shapes too familiar, too insistent. My own fear reflected in sound. My voice sounded wrong, distant, like someone else's attempt at mimicking me. I swallowed hard and forced myself forward. The path narrowed, gravestones crowding close, inscriptions I couldn't read glinting in the flashlight. The broken lanterns increased in frequency, some lying on the ground, others dangling from their posts, swinging slightly, though the wind had died down. I could almost hear them whispering, metal against glass, soft taps that seemed too deliberate to be natural. My boots crunched over one fallen post, and I froze, suddenly aware of the pattern of my own footsteps, the echo bouncing back at me, distorted. Then I saw it. A shadow flit between two stones. "Quick! Impossible!" It moved with a grace no human had, sliding across the paths like smoke curling through a chimney. I spun, flashlight shaking, but there was nothing. Just the broken lanterns, glinting shards, the suffocating darkness pressing closer with every heartbeat. "Who's there?" I called, my voice cracking. Silence. Then, a faint laugh. Not a human laugh, but something brittle, small, echoing in fragments. It bounced between the stones, between the broken lanterns, finally settling into my chest. It wasn't outside me. It was inside me, curling into my ribs and pressing my lungs tight. I forced myself to move again, following the path as best I could. Each step was deliberate, careful. The broken lanterns lined the way like markers, their shards reflecting the flashlight in tiny, fragmented glimmers, each one like a watchful eye. My hands were slick with sweat, flashlight gripped tight enough to bruise. I felt eyes everywhere. Not literal eyes, but the sensation of being studied, of each shadow testing my courage, measuring my fear. Another lantern shattered beneath my foot, glass slicing the leather of my boot. I cursed under my breath, kneeling to pick out the shards. Something moved again, closer this time. Not a shadow, but a shape. Too tall to be human, too fluid to be solid. I jerked the flashlight toward it, and it darted away, vanishing between the gravestones, leaving nothing but a trail of cold air and the faintest whisper. "You're watching." I wanted to run, to flee back to the gates, but some part of me, stubborn, trained, or foolish, kept me moving. The pattern of broken lanterns led deeper into the cemetery, into a section where the graves leaned over like they were eavesdropping. The shadows here felt heavier, darker, stretching unnaturally, connecting like bridges between the stones. I realized the lanterns were guiding me, or hurting me, though toward what I couldn't say. My breathing came fast now, shallow, but I forced myself to keep quiet, to listen. Every sound was amplified. The crunch of gravel, the faint whistle of wind through twisted metal, the soft scuffing that wasn't mine. My imagination tried to fill in the gaps, conjuring figures, faces, shapes that weren't real. Yet every instinct screamed that something was moving just beyond the light, just beyond comprehension. Then I heard it clearly, unmistakable. A soft voice, dripping with fear and familiarity, coming from somewhere to my left. "Please, don't." I froze, holding the flashlight steady. The broken lanterns to my left were intact, their glass sparkling faintly, yet the shadow of something crouched behind them. I stepped closer. "I'm here to help," I said, voice trembling. "Who's there?" "Show yourself." The shadow moved, not toward me, not away, but around the lantern, spinning impossibly, like it knew the paths better than I did. The voice whispered again, almost as if coaxing me, teasing, "You shouldn't follow." I felt it then. The first real fear of the night. The kind that isn't adrenaline, isn't reflex, but the quiet, sinking realization that I was being toyed with, that I had walked into something ancient, something patient, something that knew me better than I knew myself. Every broken lantern, every shard of glass, every whispering shadow, it wasn't random. It was deliberate. I wanted to call for backup again, but the radio remained dead. I wanted to run, but the path of broken lanterns seemed endless, stretching forward like the arms of something alive, something waiting. My flashlight flickered, briefly plunging me into total darkness, and when it came back on, the shadow was gone. But the sense of being surrounded, studied, was stronger than ever. I pressed forward. Each broken lantern felt like a warning, each shattered glass shard a small scream trapped in the night. I moved carefully, aware that the thing watching me didn't just follow. It guided, it manipulated, it understood fear as intimately as I did. The whispers came again, impossible to locate, follow, or leave. But no, you cannot leave. My heart hammered, my mind raced, and yet I couldn't stop. Somewhere ahead I could feel the voice, the trapped presence calling, pulling me deeper into the dark. I didn't know if it was human or not. I didn't know if I would survive. All I knew was that the broken lanterns weren't just markers. They were invitations, challenges, and perhaps warnings I couldn't afford to ignore. The path wound tighter, shadows merging into long fingers stretching across the graves, lanterns dangling, some swinging as if breathing. And then I understood. This wasn't just a cemetery anymore. It was a maze, a stage, and I was the only player, guided by broken light and whispered fear. I swallowed, forcing my voice back into the night. "I'm coming," I said. "I'll find you." The broken lanterns seemed to shiver at my words, like the cemetery itself had heard me and was responding, twisting in anticipation. The shadows shifted, coalescing briefly into forms I almost recognized, but vanished before my eyes could catch them. My boots sank slightly in the soft soil, and I realized the path was changing beneath me. Each step forward brought a new arrangement of stones, a new set of shattered lights, a deeper sense of being hunted. And yet, despite everything, I pressed on. Because someone was trapped here. And because even if the cemetery wanted to trick me, I couldn't turn back. Not when voices, desperate and fragile, called my name from the darkness. The deeper I moved into the cemetery, the more the world outside seemed to vanish. My flashlight's beam barely pierced the dense night, bouncing off cracked gravestones, catching glimpses of earth that had shifted like it was breathing. I could feel the air growing heavier, thicker, almost viscous, as if each inhalation carried a weight meant to press me down, to hold me here forever. I had followed the broken lanterns this far. They led me in a careful, winding pattern, always curving between rows of stones that leaned closer, almost conspiratorial. And now as I moved into the oldest section, where the graves leaned at unnatural angles and names had long eroded to illegibility, I realized something that made my stomach churn. I wasn't alone. The whispers started faintly at first, almost a trick of the wind. I froze, gripping the flashlight tighter. At first I told myself it was imagination, that it was the night playing cruel games. But then the words became clear. Not random murmurs, not cries of the wind through broken metal, but words I knew. My words, my secrets, you shouldn't have lied. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I had said those things once, months ago, late at night when no one listened but me. Memories I thought were buried, private, personal. They were repeating back to me from the shadows, carried in voices that seemed to twist the air itself. I stepped forward, cautiously. "Who's there?" My voice sounded fragile in the night, like a child's in a vast cathedral. Silence answered at first, then more whispers. "Do you remember what you did?" I froze, the beam of the flashlight shaking as my hand trembled. Each step I'd taken toward the voice had led me deeper into rows of graves that seemed to stretch endlessly, their tops dark, jagged silhouettes against the faint glow of the broken lanterns behind me. I could feel the air press in from all sides. The stones themselves seemed to lean, like they were listening, like they were aware of every mistake I had ever made. The whispers grew, multiplying, echoing from every direction, and I realized with a growing sense of panic that the voices weren't just coming from the air, they were coming from the gravestones themselves. Names long gone, dates that no one remembered, secrets carved into marble or granite long before I was born. And yet the stones were speaking to me, repeating my secrets, my fears, my shame. I stumbled back, tripping over uneven soil, and cursed under my breath. The whispers followed, persistent, intimate, like a friend turned enemy, mocking me, reminding me of every small betrayal, every lie I had ever told, every shadow in my own past. You. Never told her. I froze, every hair on my body standing up. That was a secret I hadn't told anyone, not my partner, not my family, not even in confession to myself. How could this place know? My mind tried to reason, tried to anchor itself in logic, but the deeper I went, the more the whispering became unbearable. I could feel the stones vibrating, a low hum beneath my feet, like the earth itself was resonating with my own guilt. I forced myself forward again, stepping carefully between the leaning gravestones. Each step was measured, deliberate, though my body wanted to run. I couldn't. The voice of the trapped person, the reason I had come, pulled me onward. Somewhere, beyond these whispering rows, someone needed me. And yet, the closer I got, the more the whispers multiplied, overlapping, forming sentences I couldn't ignore. You left him. You promised. You should have known. The words were precise, cutting, intimate. My chest felt tight, my legs heavy. My flashlight beam danced across the stones, revealing names and dates that blurred, twisted, like the marble itself had absorbed my fears and memories, then reflected them back in echoes. My own voice seemed to answer the whispers before I even spoke. I didn't... But the whispers wouldn't stop. They grew louder, faster, overlapping, forming a chorus of accusation that pressed into my mind. The rows seemed endless now, the shadows of the stones stretching and bending, curling toward me. Every stone had a story, and somehow each one knew mine. Each one whispered what I could not say aloud. I dropped to my knees, gripping the flashlight, trying to hold on to some shred of reality. The whispering seemed to pulse with my heartbeat, growing louder with every pulse. My thoughts were no longer my own. They were mirrored, distorted, played back to me with cruelty. You are afraid. You cannot escape. You are alone. The last words hit me like a physical blow. Alone. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally. My life, my mistakes, my regrets, they were all on display, all being observed by something ancient and patient. I wanted to scream, to run, to leave this place, but the path behind me had shifted. The graves had rearranged, leaning closer, closing in. The whispering was everywhere, in the air, under my feet, in my head. I forced myself upright. Step by step, I moved deeper into the rows. My flashlight caught another figure, or at least something resembling one, crouched behind a gravestone. Not fully human, not fully solid, its edges blurred like smoke in the light. I could see the faint glint of eyes reflecting the broken lanterns behind me. You, I whispered, voice shaking. I'm looking for you. I'm here to help. The figure didn't move, but the whispering intensified, overlapping my own words, twisting them into something I didn't recognize. Each gravestone seemed to echo my fears back to me, each shadow stretched, forming shapes that mimicked my own posture, my own movement. The cemetery had become a mirror, not of my body, but of my guilt, my shame, my deepest regrets. I stumbled forward again, heart hammering, and the voice of the trapped person cut through the chorus, fragile and desperate. Please, hurry! I followed the direction of the voice, weaving between stones, brushing away moss and soil that seemed to cling like hands, guiding me. The whispers continued, but their tone shifted slightly. There was a rhythm now, a pattern, as if the stones were waiting for me to understand something, waiting for me to move correctly through the rows. A sudden gust of wind rattled the remaining lanterns, and the whispering rose to a crescendo. The voices of my own secrets became unbearable, overlapping into a single high-pitched hum that pressed against my skull. I gritted my teeth, forced myself to focus on the direction of the trapped voice, ignoring the accusations, the echoes of my past. And then I saw it. A small form, crouched between two stones, trembling. Relief surged through me, but it was tempered by a strange, suffocating dread. I shone my flashlight fully on them. The person, or thing, looked human enough, but their face was pale, lips moving as they whispered something I couldn't quite hear over the chorus of stones. I approached cautiously. I've got you. You're safe now. They didn't respond immediately. Instead, they looked up, eyes wide, glassy, and I saw something that made my stomach twist. Behind them, the rows of gravestones seemed to shift, shadows crawling along the ground, stretching unnaturally. The whispers intensified, but now they were quieter, more like a warning than an accusation. You must leave. Before they notice, I froze, heart hammering. Who? What? No answer. Only the stones leaning closer, shadows moving in unnatural arcs, the whispering rising and falling like a tide. And the person, or figure I had come for, was silent, fragile in my hands, trembling as though the very air carried the weight of centuries of judgment. I held them close, feeling the unnatural chill radiating from their body. The whispers around me shifted, softer now, almost conversational, like the stones themselves were discussing me, debating whether I was worthy of survival. The path back seemed longer, twisted in ways I didn't recognize. Every step I took was mirrored, every motion observed, every heartbeat measured. And through it all, the whispering rows continued. A labyrinth of voices, a gallery of my own secrets, each one pressing into me, each one reminding me that the cemetery didn't just hold the dead. It held me, my past, my fears, my unspoken sins all laid bare in the cold night. I realized then that rescue wasn't just about finding the trapped person. It was about surviving this place, about walking through rows of whispered judgment and broken lanterns without succumbing to the weight of memory. Every grave I passed reminded me of who I was, of what I had done, of the truths I had buried and the lies I had told. I took a deep breath, forcing my legs to move, gripping the figure I had found. Step by step, I began to navigate the rows, trying to keep the flashlight steady, trying to ignore the whispers, trying to remember that I was still alive, still human, still capable of leaving. But the whispers didn't stop. They followed, threading through the air, through the shadows, through my own thoughts. The cemetery had become more than stones and earth. It had become memory, guilt, fear made tangible, a place where secrets could speak and shadows could wait. And as I moved forward, deeper into the rows, I understood something chilling. The whispers weren't just echoes. They were warnings. And no matter how far I went, no matter how fast I walked, they would follow me. Always. I thought I understood the cemetery before, that I knew what fear felt like. But walking deeper now, I realized I had only glimpsed its edges, like staring at the tip of an iceberg while the rest lurks beneath dark water. The rows of stones had grown tighter, shadows pooling between them, thick and viscous, as if the night itself was congealing. The broken lanterns from before had long since disappeared behind me, swallowed by darkness. I was alone, except I wasn't. The first shadow hit me softly, almost innocuously. I turned the flashlight slowly, heart hammering, expecting a figure crouched between the graves, maybe another lost soul. But there was nothing there. Just the long black streak of darkness stretching across the uneven ground. My breathing was shallow, cautious. I told myself it was the wind, my imagination, anything but what I feared. And then the second one appeared. It didn't belong to anything. It had no source, no body, but it followed me, sliding along the earth perfectly in sync with my steps. My brain refused to accept it at first. Shadows couldn't move independently. Shadows couldn't mimic human motion. Yet this one did, tracing every movement I made, delaying only slightly as if it were studying me. I froze, gripping my flashlight with trembling hands. What are you?" I whispered, my own voice small and hollow. The shadow didn't answer, didn't speak, didn't even change its form. It simply mirrored me, step for step, twitch for twitch. Panic gripped me. My heart pounded, and the coldness that had been creeping along my spine became a tangible weight. I forced myself to move again, hesitant, careful, almost afraid that stopping would provoke it. Every step I took was copied perfectly, like some dark twin walking alongside me in an invisible mirror. I remembered training, countless late-night patrols, calls that had seemed urgent at the time, but faded into memory. None of it mattered here. None of it prepared me for this. I tried to focus on the trapped person, on the reason I had come. But every time I turned my attention to them, the shadow responded, stretching, bending, changing to match the smallest motion of my body. "You cannot hide," the wind whispered. Or maybe it wasn't the wind. I didn't know anymore. I stumbled forward, heart hammering. The path narrowed, forcing me between gravestones, leaning precariously toward one another. Shadows pooled thicker here, not just on the ground, but along the walls of stone themselves. Some twisted upward, forming shapes that almost resembled figures, only to dissolve when I blinked. My flashlight's beam trembled in my grip, and I realized with a jolt that the shadow wasn't alone. Another joined it, then another. Each one perfectly mimicking me, shifting with my movements as though multiple reflections of myself had been ripped from some twisted, shadowed mirror. I could feel dread pooling in my chest, a low pressure that made my lungs ache. Every instinct screamed to run, yet something in the trapped voice, the fragile, desperate plea I had followed this far, kept me moving. I stepped past a tombstone and caught a glimpse of the trapped figure, crouched low, small, trembling. Relief surged, mingled with fear. If the shadows had noticed them, if they had decided I wasn't enough. I didn't dare imagine the consequences. "You," I whispered, voice trembling. "I've got you. Stay close. Don't move." The figure nodded, fragile, silent. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus. Step by step, we moved forward, navigating the twisted rows of graves, but the shadows didn't relent. They multiplied, stretching impossibly long, merging briefly with the gravestones before separating again, always mirroring me, always following. I thought I understood fear before. I was wrong. This wasn't fear. It was a living thing, patient, calculating, aware. Every heartbeat sent ripples through the shadows. Every step echoed like a drum beat in some dark ritual. I could feel them studying me, probing for weakness. I glanced at the trapped figure. Their eyes were wide, reflecting the faint glimmers of broken lanterns behind us. I wanted to reassure them, wanted to say it would be okay. But the shadows moved differently here. Some didn't mimic me at all. They twisted toward the figure, creeping along the soil like dark fingers reaching for something alive. I shoved the panic down and focused. "Stay behind me. Don't let go of my hand." My voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried determination, or at least the illusion of it. Step by step, I moved, trying to stay ahead of the shadows, guiding the figure with me. That's when I noticed it. One shadow, darker, sharper, more defined than the others. It didn't just mimic me, it copied my posture perfectly, down to the slight tilt of my head, the tension in my shoulders, the tremor in my hands. And for a moment, my mind refused to accept it. This shadow wasn't just following me, it was me. Or some version of me that had been pulled from the night, some reflection of fear made solid. I stopped, paralyzed. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. The shadow froze, perfectly still, matching my own hesitation. I stared, trying to find logic, trying to ground myself in reason. But there was none, not here. "Not tonight, you are mine," a voice whispered, low and guttural, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. I spun, flashlight swinging, but the figure remained huddled behind me. The shadows didn't move in response to the light. They moved independently, curling and twisting across the graves, stretching impossibly long, then shrinking, then coalescing into forms that almost resembled men, women, children, but always imperfect, always wrong, always empty eyes staring. My throat tightened. I realized something worse than fear, recognition. I knew these shadows, not individually, but collectively. They were shapes of my own guilt, my own mistakes, reflections of every corner of myself I had tried to bury. And now they were alive, pursuing me, patient, relentless. The trapped figure whimpered, tiny, fragile, and I felt a surge of responsibility. I couldn't let them be consumed by this, couldn't let the cemetery take another soul, but every step forward felt like moving through molasses. The shadows multiplied, reaching higher now, stretching across the tombstones like dark banners in some twisted parade. "You cannot escape," the voice whispered again. I grit my teeth, forcing myself to take control. I moved faster, dragging the figure with me, shining the flashlight in a desperate attempt to carve a path through the darkness. But the shadows didn't scatter. They moved around us, curling and twisting in ways that defied logic, bending the space between the gravestones. It was as if the cemetery itself had grown teeth, had opened its jaws, and we were inside its waiting mouth. I glanced down at the shadow that mimicked me perfectly. It moved when I moved, breathed when I breathed, even hesitated when I hesitated. And then impossibly it smiled. Not a human smile, not one I could recognize as life, but a dark, knowing curve that sent ice straight to my heart. Step by step, I realized something unbearable. This shadow wasn't just a copy. It was a judge, a recorder of sins, an observer of every thought I had tried to hide from myself. And it knew me better than I knew myself. The trapped figure tugged at my sleeve, weak and shivering. "Please, help me," they whispered, barely audible. I nodded, swallowing hard, and forced myself onward. The rows of graves seemed endless now. The shadows thickened, pooling along the ground, climbing the stones, connecting in ribbons of darkness that seemed to form doors and barriers I couldn't navigate. Every step was a test, every movement a gamble. I forced the flashlight toward the shadow, the one that mirrored me exactly. Its smile widened, if that's what it could be called, and for a moment I thought I saw my own eyes reflected back in the darkness. My fears, my regrets, my shame, all twisted into something alive, something patient, something waiting to claim me. "Keep moving," I whispered to myself, to the trapped figure, to anyone or anything that could hear. "We're getting out," but the shadows didn't relent. Step after step, They multiplied, stretching, twisting, coalescing. The cemetery was no longer a collection of graves. It was a living entity, a hunter, a witness, and its eyes were my own. And yet we moved forward. Step by trembling step, heart-pounding, breath shallow. Each shadow that mimicked me, each ribbon of darkness was a reminder. I wasn't just being watched. I was being measured. And whatever this cemetery was, it would not release me easily. We were moving now, though I wasn't sure where we was. The trapped figure huddled close, small, fragile, their fingers gripping mine as if letting go meant certain death. The shadows that had followed me, the mirrors of my own guilt and fear, twisted along the rows of gravestones, stretching impossibly long, forming bridges of darkness that swayed with every step I took. The cemetery had become something alive, patient, and unrelenting. Then the radio crackled. A burst of static, sharp and sudden, breaking the oppressive silence. My heart leapt. I pressed it to my ear, voice tight. Unit 5, Officer Davis, I need immediate backup. Trapped person located, requesting... Silence. Just static. I frowned. The static lingered, vibrating through the radio like it carried a pulse of its own. Then faintly, a voice. Not dispatch. Not human. My own voice. Step carefully. Don't look back. I froze, gripping the flashlight harder. My blood ran cold. The whispers that had plagued the rows of graves now poured directly into the radio, filling the small metal box with my thoughts, my fears, every word I'd whispered to myself in the dead of night. You cannot leave. I stumbled, nearly dropping the radio. The trapped figure whispered behind me, small and urgent. They're there. I spun, flashlight sweeping the graves, and for a terrifying moment, I saw movement in every shadow. Not just the shadows that had followed me before, but new forms, indistinct, fluid, slithering across the earth with a grace that no human could replicate. They mirrored my every movement, some perfect, some grotesque parodies, all patient, all silent. The radio crackled again. My heartbeat echoed through the static. Then my voice, unmistakably mine, whispered questions I hadn't spoken aloud, fears I hadn't confessed to anyone. Will I survive? Should I have left? What if I fail? The trapped figure whimpered, tugging at my sleeve. I forced myself to bend down to whisper, We're going to get out. Just stay with me. My words felt empty, even to me, swallowed by the thick, wet darkness of the cemetery. Step by careful step, I moved forward, dragging them behind me. The path was no longer predictable. The gravestones had rearranged themselves again, leaning closer, forming narrow corridors, dead ends, impossible angles. The shadows multiplied, thickening into shapes I could almost recognize. Faces, hands, empty eyes. Each shadow reflected a memory, a mistake, a sin. And all of them were mine. The radio whispered again, faintly, a distorted mimicry of my own voice. You cannot save them. You cannot save yourself. I shouted, anger and fear colliding. Stop! I'm not leaving them! The air shifted in response. Cold fingers threading through my coat, tugging at my skin, wrapping around my chest. The shadows recoiled briefly, as if irritated by my defiance, only to surge forward again in darker, thicker ribbons. I pushed the trapped figure ahead, guiding them through a narrow corridor between graves that leaned unnaturally. Their inscriptions blurred and smudged as if the stone itself had bled. My flashlight caught one of the shadows, perfectly mimicking me again, standing taller, wider, almost solid now, eyes hollow and accusing. I swallowed, forcing my legs to move, and then I heard it. A siren. A real siren, distant, faint, but unmistakable. Relief surged through me. Backup was coming. Safety was near. I called out. They're here! Keep moving! But as the sound drew closer, I realized something was wrong. The siren's rhythm was off. Slow, distorted. Not the sharp wail of human-made machines, but something hollow, reverberating unnaturally. And then the radio, alive in my pocket, crackled again, louder this time. Do you hear it? It's your siren. My stomach dropped. The voice mimicked the sound of the approaching backup, but warped, echoing in tones I had never heard, tones that carried my own panic, my own dread. The shadows stretched taller, curling over the gravestones, merging, forming arches and tunnels that the real world could not have contained. The cemetery itself had become an instrument, and I was its single note. I shook the trapped figure gently. "We have to keep moving, now!" They obeyed, trembling, stepping carefully over roots and uneven soil. And then the ground beneath us seemed to shift. Not tremor, not quake, but a subtle, deliberate rising and sinking, as if the earth were breathing. The shadows responded, curling in patterns that I could feel in my chest. Every heartbeat became a drum in a ritual I didn't understand, every breath measured and mirrored by the dark forms surrounding us. The radio whispered again. Not words exactly, but thoughts. My thoughts. Private fears, secret wishes, doubts I'd buried deep inside. You will fail, alone, forgotten. I forced my mind to resist. "I will not fail," I said aloud, voice trembling but firm. "I will get us out. I swear it." And for a moment the shadows paused, quivering, as if considering me, as if weighing the truth of my claim. But the pause didn't last. They surged, stretching longer, darker, sliding across the graves, mirroring, twisting, observing. I forced myself forward, dragging the trapped figure through a narrow gap between two leaning stones. One of the shadows shifted to block my path, perfectly imitating me, down to the angle of my shoulders and the trembling of my hands. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. Its presence alone was accusation, reminder, and threat. "You cannot leave." I gritted my teeth. I pushed forward, brushing past it, guiding the figure, moving faster now. The cemetery seemed endless, the shadows multiplying with every step. The siren, distorted, hollow, grew louder, closer, but it did not lead to safety. It led us further into the labyrinth, deeper into the waiting darkness. The trapped figure cried softly behind me. I wanted to reassure them, wanted to promise safety, but I didn't even know if it existed. All I knew was that forward was the only option. Forward, through shadows that moved with a mind of their own, through gravestones that leaned closer as if to whisper, through radio static that echoed my every fear back at me. The siren's wail became unbearable, a scream of metal and air, impossibly human and impossibly wrong. And then it stopped. Silence. The radio, however, did not. It played my thoughts again, faintly at first, then louder, almost laughing, mocking me. "You are trapped. Just like them. Always watching." I staggered, gripping the trapped figure tightly. I wanted to call out, to curse, to scream, but my voice felt swallowed by the night. The shadows pulsed, stretching toward us, coalescing, merging into forms I could barely comprehend. The cemetery had become alive, and we were inside its lungs, breathing its air, trapped in its rhythm. I forced myself to move, forcing them along. Step after step, each shadow twisting, elongating, reaching. My own shadow, the dark twin that had followed me since the first encounter, stretched longer, grew taller, looming over us like a sentinel or a judge. Every movement I made was mirrored, every hesitation noted, every thought echoed back in the radio. "You cannot leave." I ignored it. Step by trembling step, heart hammering, lungs burning, we moved forward. Forward through whispers, forward through shadows, forward through the distorted wail of the siren that had promised rescue but brought only deeper fear. And then, finally, something changed. The shadows shifted, dispersing slightly as though a door had opened somewhere ahead. The distorted siren became a faint, normal wail, real this time, echoing from the distance. Relief surged, fragile, tentative, but real. I called out. "This way! Keep moving!" The trapped figure followed, trembling but steady now, trusting me, holding my hand. We ran, or as close as one could run in the twisting corridors of graves and shadows, toward the sound, toward the promise of safety. The radio fell silent, leaving only the normal hum of the night. No whispers, no mocking mimicry. I dared to breathe, though every nerve in my body was still taut, alert, waiting. We reached the outer edge of the cemetery. The shadows lingered, stretching to the last rows of stones, refusing to leave, their shapes frozen, watching, waiting. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. The sirens of real patrol cars approached, their red and blue lights cutting through the darkness like knives, bringing the first warmth I'd felt all night. I guided the trapped figure into the light. They stumbled, nearly collapsing, but I held them, whispered reassurances I didn't entirely believe. And for the first time since entering the cemetery, I felt a flicker of safety. The shadows remained. In the rows, behind the stones, in the echoes of my memory, I knew they would not disappear. The cemetery had marked me, had mirrored my fears, had measured my soul. And though I had escaped, for now, I knew that some part of me had stayed behind, lurking in the whispered corners, waiting for the night to return. I exhaled, pulling the flashlight close, listening to the real sirens draw closer. Finally human, finally comforting, but even in their sound I could hear it. The echo of my own thoughts, the memory of every whisper, every shadow, every accusation. I realized then, fully, that the cemetery doesn't release those it touches. It teaches patience, observation, and fear. And some lessons never end. It was raining so hard I could barely see the edges of the cemetery gate. The kind of rain that doesn't just fall but presses down on you, like the clouds are trying to squeeze every ounce of warmth from your skin. My uniform was soaked through in minutes, my boots squishing with every step. I had gotten the call about a disturbance near hollow ground, but all I could hear was the rain, hammering the gravestones, slapping against the iron fence, drumming on the roof of my car like 100 frantic fingers. I stepped out, my flashlight cutting a weak beam into the darkness. The wet earth smelled sharp, like mud mixed with something older. Decay, rot, the scent of 1,000 bodies resting just beneath the surface. And then I heard it, a voice, panic, trembling, calling my name. "Officer, help me." It came from somewhere inside the graveyard, but the rain, God, the rain was louder than any human voice could ever hope to be. Every time I thought I had it, the voice seemed to dart just out of reach, swallowed by the noise of falling water. I shouted, but my words were useless. The rain muffled everything. "Hello? Who's there?" I yelled again, stepping cautiously over gravestones slick with moss and rainwater. The grass was thick, clinging to my boots, dragging at me like it wanted to slow me down. The voice answered again, closer this time, or maybe farther. My mind was starting to twist the sounds into shapes I couldn't trust. I remember stopping by a stone marked with a cross. The name was worn down, the letters just smudges in the dark. The voice came again, this time so desperate it made my chest ache. "Please, don't leave me." It sounded like a child, but I couldn't be sure. Fear makes everything sound smaller, weaker. I wanted to run to it, grab it, and tell it I was here. But the darkness was thick, and the rain kept slamming against me. Every time I moved, the sound of the voice shifted, like it was darting around the tombstones. I spun in a circle, flashlight shaking, trying to locate it. But all I got was the echo bouncing back from wet stone. The graveyard was enormous. Hollow ground had been here for over a century. Old stones leaned at impossible angles, cracked and broken by time, rain soaking the etched names and dates until they ran like ink in water. I could hear the rain in the trees now, leaves rattling like brittle bones. A branch hit me across the shoulder and I flinched, heart hammering. The voice called again, more urgent, almost pleading, "Over here, please!" I moved toward the sound, but the ground was uneven, sunk in places, water pooling in craters left by forgotten graves. My boots sank into mud, sucking at me with every step. I tripped, caught myself on a stone, and cursed under my breath. The voice was gone. Silence swallowed the space between the rainfalls. Then, faintly, a laugh. Not a real laugh. Something thin, high-pitched, trembling. I spun toward it, flashlight sweeping, heart in my throat. Nothing. Only rain, only the trees shivering under the storm. I swallowed hard, feeling the tension tighten in my shoulders. I took another step. The mud squelched around my boots. Footprints, I thought at first, but they were not my own. Tiny, irregular, leading deeper into the cemetery, vanishing in the puddles. I knelt down to look closer. They were there, and then they weren't, like the earth itself was swallowing them. The voice came back, a whisper this time, so faint I thought it might be in my head. "Don't leave me." I followed it. The rain was relentless, pouring down my neck, filling my ears with its roar. My uniform clung to me, heavy and cold. Every step I took felt wrong, as if the ground wanted me to fail, wanted me to fall into the mud and disappear like the footprints. I passed an old tomb, half collapsed. Inside, shadows moved, or maybe I imagined them. My flashlight flickered. I could feel my pulse in my throat. I kept walking, drawn forward. The voice was all around me now, darting between stones, whispering from nowhere and everywhere at once. I called back, "I'm here! Where are you?" My words were swallowed by the storm. But it answered, this time closer. Right behind me or maybe ahead. I couldn't tell. The rain masked everything. The ground shifted underfoot. I slipped, hands plunging into wet earth. I caught myself on a gravestone, mud smeared across my uniform. I looked up. The tombs stretched around me like jagged teeth. Shadows clung to every corner. And then I saw movement. A figure, just beyond the reach of the light. Shaped like a person, but bending, twisting in ways that made my stomach turn. I froze. My voice caught. "Hey, wait!" It vanished. The rain masked the sound of my heartbeat, but I could feel it in my ears, loud and hollow. I moved toward where it had been, flashlight shaking. The voice called again, desperate and broken. "Please, don't leave me!" I stumbled over a root, nearly falling, hands scraping against wet stone. I reached for the voice, trying to pull it out of the dark, trying to grab it. But it was gone. The only thing there was the rain, drumming, relentless. I paused, breathing hard, shaking mud from my gloves. My mind screamed at me to leave, to run back to the road, to the car, to anything warm and dry. But something in me refused. That voice, whatever it was calling, and I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't leave it there. The rain softened for a moment, a strange lull that made the silence feel sharper. I could hear dripping now, water falling off stones in slow, deliberate drops. And in the spaces between, I thought I heard footsteps. Not mine, someone or something. Moving just out of sight, keeping pace with me, matching me, leading me deeper. I followed. My boots squished, mud sucking at me with each step. I passed rows of tombstones, names worn smooth, dates fading into nothing. The voice came again, closer, almost under my skin. "Help me?" I stopped at a circle of older graves. The stones here were ancient, blackened with age and weather, tilted like they were whispering secrets to each other. I knelt by one, brushing away moss, mud, trying to find a clue, anything. And then I felt it, a presence. Behind me, heavy, watching. I spun, flashlight slicing through the gloom. Nothing. The rain picked up again, hammering down in sheets. The voice screamed now, high and shrill. I stumbled backward, heart pounding, mud splattering across my face. "I'm here! I'm coming!" And then it stopped. The rain roared louder, drowning everything, and there was silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. The kind of silence that makes you notice your own heartbeat, your own breath, the way your skin pricks under wet uniform. I stayed still, listening. Nothing. I called out, voice hoarse. "Hello? Are you still there?" No answer. Just the rain. I took a step forward, then another. The mud clung to my boots, the cold sinking into my bones. I looked around. Hollow ground stretched endlessly, a forest of gravestones, wet and dark. The voice could be anywhere, or nowhere. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my hands. Somewhere in the distance, a single drop hit a tombstone, ringing out clear above the storm. I shivered. And I knew somewhere in this graveyard, someone or something was calling me, just out of reach. I couldn't see it. I couldn't touch it. But I could hear it. And it wouldn't stop. I took another step. The rain poured. The dark pressed in on every side. And I knew this was only the beginning. The rain hadn't let up. If anything, it was worse now, turning hollow ground into a mess of mud and slick stones. Every step I took made a squelching sound, sucking at my boots like the earth itself didn't want to let me leave. I thought I had lost the voice from before, but hollow ground has a way of keeping you company in unexpected ways. I stopped for a moment, trying to catch my breath. The rain poured off the brim of my hat and ran down my neck, soaking through my collar. The ground was soft, giving beneath me, and I could see tiny rivulets of water racing each other between graves, carrying leaves, dirt, and little bits of litter from who knows where. And that's when I saw them. Footprints, not mine. Not any I recognized. Mud pressed into the earth, irregular, small. The kind that could belong to a child, maybe, or someone trying to appear smaller than they were. They led from one grave to another, then vanished, only to appear a few feet farther along. It was like someone, or something, was always just ahead, staying out of reach. I crouched down, running my gloved fingers along the edge of a print. The mud was slick and my hands came away filthy. I swallowed hard, my heart picking up. They were too deliberate to be animals, too human. And yet, there was something off. The spacing was uneven, almost deliberate in its inconsistency, like whoever or whatever made them wanted me to notice but not follow too easily. I stood, flashlight cutting through the dark rain. The prints led deeper into the cemetery, toward older tombs where the stones were cracked and worn smooth. I followed them cautiously, trying to keep my footing in the mud. Every step made me sink slightly, boots leaving my own prints alongside the mysterious ones. And then, they disappeared. I spun around, flashlight sweeping over the wet earth. Nothing. Only the relentless rain and the dark silhouettes of the tombstones. I could feel my pulse in my ears loud against the quiet spaces between raindrops. And then, faintly, I heard it. A scrape, a subtle movement just beyond the beam of light. I froze. Footsteps, soft and irregular, barely there. Moving ahead or behind? I couldn't tell. Every instinct told me to run, to leave this place, but curiosity rooted me in place. I whispered almost to myself, "Who's there?" Silence. Then another scrape, closer this time. My flashlight swung around, illuminating nothing but the twisted shapes of old stones. My boots sank deeper into the mud as I moved forward, following the faint trail that seemed to appear and vanish at random. The voice, or something like it, was gone, but the footprints kept moving. They didn't follow a straight path. They twisted, curved, sometimes doubling back. It was a game. I remembered something from training, something I tried to ignore. The mind starts to see patterns where none exist when fear takes over. I told myself it could be the rain playing tricks on me, the way the light catches mud in strange ways. But my gut told me differently. Whatever had been here before, it was still here. Watching. I reached a set of tombs, older than the rest. The stones were slick with moss and rain, their inscriptions mostly unreadable. The mud around them was churned up, as if someone had been pacing in circles, moving back and forth. I crouched, inspecting the prints. And there they were again, disappearing just as quickly as they appeared, as if the earth itself wanted to hide them from me. I moved closer, flashlight shaking, trying to see the path. And then I noticed something new, tiny impressions in the mud, almost like scratches. They were faint, barely noticeable, but unmistakable. Nails, maybe, or claws. I couldn't tell which. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. "All right, show yourself." Nothing. I followed the prints further, boots sinking deeper with each step. The rain was relentless, pouring down in sheets, blurring the edges of the tombstones. Shadows moved in the corners of my vision, shifting as if something was keeping pace with me, just outside the flashlight's beam. My heart hammered. The footprints led me toward the back of the cemetery, toward an area I hadn't explored before, older, neglected, where the stones leaned like they were whispering secrets to each other. And then they stopped. I stood over a small patch of mud, the prints vanishing completely. No sign of who or what had made them. I took a step forward. My boots sank into wet earth, and then movement. Just a flicker at first. Something at the edge of my vision, gone when I tried to look directly at it. I swung the flashlight hard in my throat. Nothing. Just shadows, twisted and dripping with rain. I took another step, then another. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and decay. Every now and then I caught a glimpse of movement, but whenever I looked, it was gone. I told myself it was exhaustion, fear, rain in my eyes. But deep down, I knew better. The footprints began again, closer, ahead, behind. I couldn't tell. They moved like they were taunting me, appearing where I thought I had already walked. I called out, voice trembling, "I know you're there! Come out!" Silence. Then a whisper. Just a word, faint, barely audible over the rain. Stop! I froze. Every muscle in my body tensed. The mud beneath me seemed to shift, pulling at my boots. My flashlight flickered. The whisper came again, closer this time, almost in my ear. Stop! I turned, shining the light in every direction. Nothing, only rain and the twisted shapes of the tombstones. My pulse pounded. The air felt heavier, like the storm had slowed, giving the cemetery time to breathe around me. I followed the footprints again, boots sinking deep, mud splashing up my legs. They led toward a circle of stones, ancient and cracked. The earth here was churned, wet, and soft. Something had been pacing in this exact spot. I could see the prints pressed deep, almost like claws had been digging at the mud. I stepped closer, flashlight trembling. The prints vanished again, and then faintly a laugh. Thin, high-pitched, almost musical, but not human. My stomach twisted. I whispered, "Who's there?" The laugh echoed between the tombstones, bouncing back at me from every angle. I felt it brush against my mind, a fleeting presence I couldn't catch. I shivered, rain running down my face, cold and heavy. Then the footprints started again, this time right behind me. I spun. Nothing. My boots squelched in the mud. I shone the light ahead. Nothing. And yet, something moved. I could feel it, just out of reach, mirroring me, keeping pace without ever revealing itself. I tried to follow, keeping my eyes on the trail. It twisted, turned, looping back toward the older graves. Every step felt wrong, uneven, like the ground itself was resisting me. I slipped once, hands hitting mud and wet stone. My flashlight danced across the ground, illuminating nothing but footprints that vanished almost as soon as I saw them. I realized then that I had no idea where I was going. The footprints weren't leading anywhere in particular. They were everywhere, nowhere. The cemetery had become a maze of wet mud and shadows, and I was trapped in it with something that refused to show itself. I called out again, voice hoarse. "Show yourself! Stop this!" A whisper in reply, soft and broken. "Follow! Don't stop!" I froze. My mind twisted. Did I want to follow or run? The rain pressed down harder, soaking through my uniform, chilling me to the bone. I could see my own footprints beside the strange ones, evidence that I was moving, following, chasing something I couldn't see. The trail led me past a broken tomb. One half buried in mud, its stone cracked and jagged. The prints circled it, then vanished again. I crouched, trying to see any sign of movement. Nothing. Only the storm, relentless and unforgiving. And then, I felt it. A presence. Behind me. Heavy, watching, waiting. I spun, flashlight shaking. Shadows moved, twisting between stones. I called out, voice trembling, mud slipping under my boots. "Who's there?" Silence. The footprints appeared again. Ahead. Always ahead. Always just out of reach. I realized then that I was running in place, chasing something that wanted me to follow, wanted me to lose myself in this wet, dark maze. I swallowed hard, feeling my chest tighten. Rain poured down my neck. Mud clung to my boots. And I kept moving, following footprints that appeared and disappeared, following a presence that I could feel but never see. Hollow ground had me now, and I knew it wasn't going to let me go. The rain had eased slightly, but the air was thick and heavy, clinging to my skin. Hollow ground seemed endless, stretching on in every direction, tombstone after tombstone, leaning, cracked, slick with moss. The mud still clung to my boots, sucking at me with every step. I had been following the footprints for what felt like hours, though I knew it couldn't have been that long. Time seemed different here, slowed, stretched, warped by the storm and the shadows. And then I heard it, a cry. Soft at first, almost imperceptible, like the sob of someone trapped, desperate, calling out for help. My heart leapt into my throat. I froze, listening. It came again, clearer now, echoing between the tombstones, twisting around corners I couldn't see. "Hello?" I called, voice shaking. "I'm here. Who's there?" The sound didn't answer directly. It moved, around me, over there behind a row of older graves, then there ahead in the mist of rain. Each cry was identical, pleading but impossible to pin down. I realized, with a cold knot tightening in my stomach, that the sound didn't have a single source. It was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. I stepped forward cautiously, flashlight slicing through the shadows. My boots sank deep into the mud. Every step made me feel smaller, more exposed. The cries came again, pulling at me. I wanted to run, to escape this place. But something stronger than fear kept me moving forward, compelled, drawn. I passed a row of broken tombs, older than anything I had seen before. The stones leaned like they were whispering secrets to each other, their inscriptions mostly worn away. The cries grew louder here, closer, almost tangible. My throat felt tight, my chest aching. I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. "Who are you? What do you want?" The air was cold, heavy with the smell of wet earth and decay. My flashlight flickered, making the shadows jump across the tombstones. And then I saw it, a shape, fleeting just beyond the beam. Something small, human-shaped, but wrong. The moment I focused on it, it vanished, leaving only the dark, dripping stones behind. The cries came again, louder, insistent. I had to follow. My boots squelched through the mud, leaving a trail of my own in the dark earth. I could feel it. A presence, something moving just out of reach, guiding me deeper into hollow ground. Every instinct screamed at me to stop, to turn back, but my feet kept moving. I stumbled over a root, hands smashing into mud and wet stone. The flashlight wobbled, illuminating nothing but shadows. And then faintly I saw footprints, tiny, irregular, disappearing and reappearing like in the last section of the cemetery I had followed. They led ahead, closer to the source of the cries. I followed them. Each step felt heavier than the last, my body soaked, shivering. The cries were closer now, coming from all sides. I spun, trying to catch sight of whoever or whatever was making them. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but it still fell relentlessly, drumming against my shoulders and helmet, filling the silence between the cries with its own chaotic rhythm. I rounded a row of ancient stones, half buried in mud, and saw it again. A shadow crouched, hunched, moving just beyond the light. I raised my voice, trembling. "I'm here! It's okay! I'll help you!" The shadow darted, vanishing before I could focus. The cries came louder, frantic now. My hands shook, gripping the flashlight like it was the only anchor in this nightmare. I followed the sound, boots sinking into the mud, slipping, sliding, heart pounding in my ears. And then it stopped. The cries ceased, leaving only the soft hiss of rain on wet stone. The silence was thick, heavy, pressing down on me like a weight. I could feel it, eyes unseen, watching, waiting. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. My boots squelched in the mud as I stepped forward, hesitant, scanning the tombstones. Nothing moved, nothing shifted. I called again, voice cracking. "Are you there? Please, don't be afraid. I'm here." Silence. Then a whisper, soft, almost tender, brushing against my mind. "Here." I froze, heart hammering. My flashlight flickered, beam shaking over the wet graves. Shadows seemed to twist and lengthen, bending toward me. I moved closer, drawn by the voice, compelled by a need I couldn't name. The mud sucked at my boots with every step. The cries started again, not from one place, but everywhere at once. Each tomb seemed to have a voice hidden behind it. Some sounded weak, frightened. Others, angry, malicious. They pulled me deeper into the older section of hollow ground, where the stones were tilted, broken, and covered in moss. I stumbled, slipping, falling onto my hands and knees. The mud clung to me, cold and suffocating. My flashlight rolled slightly, casting jagged shadows across the ground, and then I saw it, a shape crouched between tombstones, smaller than a man, but larger than a child, impossible to define. I froze. It watched me, head tilting unnaturally. I could feel its gaze on me, heavy, suffocating. The cries rose in volume, overlapping, echoing through the cemetery. I wanted to run, to flee, but my body refused. Something in me wanted to reach out, to comfort, to understand. The figure shifted. A step, slow and deliberate, but before I could react, it vanished. The cries changed, shifting from despair to warning, whispering threats I couldn't comprehend. I swallowed hard, feeling panic rise in my chest. The mud beneath me seemed to pulse, alive, pulling me closer to the center of the graves. I stumbled forward, boots heavy, mud clinging, flashlight shaking. The cries called from all directions, impossible to locate, impossible to ignore. I could feel a pull, deeper into the heart of the older graves, toward the place where the earth seemed disturbed, unnatural. I reached a small clearing, circular, surrounded by leaning tombstones. The cries stopped suddenly. The silence was deafening. My breath came in ragged gasps. My flashlight illuminated nothing but the wet stones, the mud, the uneven ground. And then a single footprint appeared in front of me, small, irregular, pressed deep into the mud. I knelt, fingers brushing the edge. The impression was fresh. My pulse hammered. I looked up, and for the first time, I realized the presence had been following me all along, moving just out of reach, leading me here. The whispers returned, soft, almost inside my head. Look. I looked around the circle. The tombstones leaned inward as if watching me, enclosing me. Mud squelched under my boots. I felt exposed, small, but the pull was undeniable. I followed the footprints again, deeper into the center. Then I saw them, more prints, forming a path I couldn't follow, twisting and turning impossibly. They seemed to mock me, daring me to chase them. And in the center, the mud was disturbed, churned up, wet and sticky, like something had been struggling there. I reached out to touch it. The mud squelched under my fingers. It was warm, alive. My stomach twisted. A whisper ran through my mind, soft but insistent. "You can't leave." I spun, shining the flashlight. Shadows moved between the tombstones. Every one of them seemed to shift when I looked away. My chest tightened. My pulse roared in my ears. I realized then that I wasn't just following the cries. I was being herded, guided, trapped. Hollow ground had its claws in me now, I called. Out, voice shaking. "I'm here! I'm not leaving you!" Silence. Then the whispers, circling me. "Follow! Don't stop!" The footprints appeared again, in front, behind, everywhere at once. My boots sank into the mud with every step. I wanted to flee, to leave, but something compelled me forward, toward the heart of this cursed cemetery. The cries overlapped now, hundreds of voices, some weak, some angry, all impossible to locate. I stumbled, mud clinging, flashlight shaking. The shadows shifted. Shapes crouched just beyond the light. I could feel their gaze, heavy and suffocating. My breath came in ragged gasps. My hands shook. And yet I kept moving, drawn forward, following. Footprints that led nowhere, cries that came from everywhere, and a presence I could feel but never see. Hollow ground had me, and I knew deep down that leaving was no longer an option. The rain had stopped, or at least it had softened to a thin, persistent drizzle. But hollow ground was still soaked, dripping with wet earth and the remnants of the storm. My uniform clung to me, heavy and cold, boots caked in mud that squelched with every step. I had been following the cries, the footprints, the presence, for what felt like hours. The cemetery stretched endlessly, a forest of leaning stones and shadows. And now, silence. It pressed in, thick and suffocating, heavier than the storm had ever been. I realized with a shiver that the cries had stopped. No whispering, no footsteps, no movement except my own squelching boots. And yet, I could feel it, watching, waiting, just out of reach. I stopped at the far edge of the cemetery, where the ground leveled and the tombstones thinned. The mud here was softer, more forgiving, but my body was too tired to care. I knelt for a moment, catching my breath, looking down at the prints in the wet earth. My own footprints led in a jagged line across the cemetery, mixed with the others, smaller, irregular, impossible to trace. They had guided me here, though to what, I didn't know. I rose slowly, flashlight sweeping across the wet graves. Everything was still. The wind rustled through the trees, dripping water from branches onto stones below. Shadows stretched long in the dim light, twisting in the corners of my vision. I could feel eyes on me, not human eyes, older, colder, impossible to meet, but undeniably there. I stepped forward. The mud squelched, boots sinking with each motion. I wanted to speak, to call out, but my voice was gone, swallowed by fear and exhaustion. The air felt alive, heavy with moisture and something else, something old, patient, and impossible to name. The footprints. They had stopped here, at the edge of the cemetery. I looked around, flashlight trembling in my hands. No movement, no cries, just the endless array of wet stones and dark earth. And yet, something shifted in the corner of my vision. I turned sharply. Nothing. But the feeling remained. Heavy, suffocating, watching, waiting. I could sense it, a presence that had followed me through mud and rain, through cries and whispers, through the impossible twisting of hollow ground. And now it was here, silent, patient, observing. I swallowed hard. My teeth chattered. "Who's there?" I whispered, barely audible. Silence. I moved forward slowly, flashlight beam wavering over the ground. The tombstones here were older, leaning, broken, some half buried in mud. I could see the indentations where I had been following the presence, the prints, the disturbances in the earth, the path that had led me here. They were empty now, gone. And yet the sense of being watched never left me. I stepped over a small, cracked stone. The mud clung to my boots, dragging at me. I paused. My chest tightened. I realized I was completely alone, or at least no one was visible, but that didn't make the presence any less real. I could feel it. Every hair on my neck rose, every nerve alert. I called out again, voice hoarse, "I'm not leaving! I need to know!" No answer. Only the drizzle, dripping from leaves, echoing softly in the silence. I moved toward the outer edge of the cemetery. The stones thinned here, spaced farther apart. Beyond them, I could see the forest beginning, dark and wet, trees dripping from the storm. The rain had left puddles in the ground, reflecting the dim light from my flashlight. And in those reflections, for a moment, I thought I saw movement. Not in the shadows, but in the water itself. Something crouched, shifting, impossible to focus on. I blinked. It was gone. I kept walking, boots heavy, uniform soaked, flashlight shaking. My body ached from the storm, from the mud, from hours of tense vigilance. Yet I couldn't leave. I couldn't ignore the presence. It had guided me here, led me through hollow ground with whispers, cries, footprints that appeared and vanished through the storm and darkness. I reached the farthest stone at the cemetery's edge. Beyond it, nothing but the forest, dripping and dark. The mud beneath me was soft, giving slightly with each step. I knelt, running gloved fingers along the wet earth, inspecting the prints one last time. They ended here. No continuation, no escape, and still, watching. I stood, flashlight sweeping the clearing, heart hammering. The air felt thick, alive, pressing against me from all sides. I could feel the weight of 100 unseen eyes. My pulse roared. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to leave, to climb over the fence and get to safety. But something kept me rooted in place, compelled. I thought I saw a figure, a shape, crouched low just at the edge of the light. I raised my voice, trembling. "Show yourself! I'm not afraid!" Nothing. I took another step. The mud squelched beneath my boots. My flashlight flickered. Shadows shifted between the tombstones, twisting, impossible to focus on. I could feel breath on my neck, cold and wet, though the air around me was still. My chest tightened. I swallowed hard. A whisper, barely audible, brushing against my mind. "Don't leave!" I spun, shining the light across the clearing. No one. Only stones, only mud, only the faint drizzle falling from dark leaves. And yet, the presence lingered, patient, unmoving but undeniably there. I moved closer to the outer edge, peering into the dark forest. Something stirred, branches rustling, a shadow flitting between trunks. I held my breath, flashlight trembling, heart hammering, and then I realized something. Hollow ground had led me here, yes, but it wasn't just guiding me, it was keeping me. The prints, the cries, the whispers, they weren't a trail to safety. They were a trap. I looked down at the mud at my feet. My own footprints were mixed with the others. Smaller, irregular, impossible to trace. They ended here. This was the boundary. The place where the presence no longer needed to hide, where it could watch silently while I stood exposed. The drizzle continued, falling steadily, water dripping from branches onto stones, onto mud, onto me. My boots squelched. My uniform clung. The night was quiet except for the soft sound of falling water. And still, watching. I swallowed hard, shaking. My flashlight beam quivered as I scanned the clearing. Nothing moved, yet I could feel it. Behind, beside, above. Impossible to locate, impossible to confront. Just watching, waiting. I took a step forward. The mud gave slightly beneath my boots. My chest ached. The night pressed in. I could feel the presence in every shadow, in every stone, in every drop of water dripping from the leaves. And then, nothing. The cries were gone. The whispers were gone. Only the soft drizzle remained. Hollow ground was silent. The world outside didn't exist here, didn't matter. Only the mud, the stones, the wet air, and the presence, waiting, watching, patient. I realized I was alone. Completely, utterly alone. And yet not. Not entirely. Something had been following me. Something had guided me here. And now, at the far edge of the cemetery, I understood that it didn't need to show itself to dominate me. Its eyes were everywhere. Its presence filled every shadow, every sound, every silence. I wanted to turn, to leave, to escape into the forest beyond. But my boots were heavy with mud, my uniform soaked, my body trembling. And the presence watched. I stayed there for what felt like hours, motionless, flashlight beam trembling, listening to the rain, listening to the silence, feeling the unseen gaze on me. Every instinct screamed at me to move, to run, to escape. But the truth was simple. Hollow ground had claimed me. Not with violence, not with sound, but with patience, with presence, with quiet observation that made me smaller, weaker, and exposed. I realized then that leaving wasn't a choice. Not really. Not while it watched. Not while the prints lingered in the mud, leading me here, leaving me with nothing but the drizzle, the stones, the wet earth, and the suffocating certainty of being observed. I shivered, rain dripping from my hair onto my face. My flashlight beam fell on a broken tombstone. I could feel it watching, something patient and ancient. I could feel it in the mud beneath my boots, in the air that clung to my skin, in the silence that was louder than any storm. I stepped back slightly, squelching, cold and soaked, heart hammering. I realized that I wasn't lost. Hollow ground had allowed me to find the edge. But freedom. Freedom was an illusion. I could still feel it. Watching, waiting, patient. I stayed there for a long time, shivering, drenched, boots sinking into the mud. The drizzle fell steadily, and I knew deep down I would never forget the way it felt to be observed without being seen. The way the silence of hollow ground pressed against your chest, filling your ears, your eyes, your mind. I stepped forward once more. My boots squelched. Mud clung. Rain dripped from every surface. I was drenched, alone, and I could feel the presence in everything. In the mud, in the stones, in the silence, in myself. Watching, waiting, patient. And I knew then that some part of me would always remain here. Not because I wanted to, not because I chose to, but because hollow ground had decided it, and the drizzle continued, soft, endless, carrying the weight of something older than the cemetery itself. E was alone. And yet, I was not. Hollow ground had me, and it would not let go. It was supposed to be just another night. The kind that makes you double-check your flashlight, but nothing else. Graveyard patrol, they called it. Quiet, easy, uneventful. I laughed at myself as I walked past the first row of stones, my boots crunching against the frost-hardened soil. The air smelled like wet leaves and iron, the kind of smell that sticks to your clothes even after you wash them. I thought about how long I'd been doing this job, how familiar I was with these paths. Every gravestone felt like a map I'd memorized, and yet, something in the way the wind moved that night felt different, heavier, like it carried whispers too soft to catch at first. I had my radio clipped to my shoulder, though the chatter had gone quiet for hours. Maybe the other patrols were on the east side of town. Maybe it was just dead air. I squinted into the dark, shining my flashlight across names etched in marble. Some were centuries old, others barely months. I recognized a few. Regular visitors, maybe someone from the local church who came to lay flowers. Everything seemed normal, routine, and then I saw it. Movement. Between two stones, a slight flicker like a shadow that didn't belong. I froze. My pulse jumped, but I told myself it was a rabbit, maybe a stray cat. I'd seen them here before. I took another step, and the shape shifted again. Not like an animal. Too deliberate, too human. My fingers brushed the grip of my nightstick as I whispered into the air, half hoping someone, anyone, would answer if I called out. But the wind swallowed the sound. I moved closer, trying to stay calm. My flashlight's beam trembled in my hand. The closer I got, the more I noticed the details. The movement wasn't random. It lingered just long enough behind a gravestone for me to see it out of the corner of my eye, then vanish when I looked straight at it. I told myself I was imagining it. The night plays tricks, they say. Shadows merge with trees, fog twists into faces. But it kept happening. Every time I approached, the figure slipped away, always between the same two graves, always just beyond reach. I crouched for a better look. The soil was freshly turned there, but not recently. Days old, maybe weeks. Too smooth, too clean, as if someone or something had been careful. My heartbeat hammered in my ears. I tried to rationalize it. A maintenance worker? A prankster? My flashlight scanned the surrounding stones, the bare trees, the headstones leaning like tired soldiers. Nothing, no one. And yet I felt eyes on me. A cold wind brushed past my neck, and I shivered. The air grew heavier, almost solid. My radio squawked once, sharp and loud, making me jump. But no one spoke. Only static. I shook my head and muttered to myself, "Get it together. It's just your imagination." I had said the same thing 100 times before, in situations less frightening than this, but tonight it rang hollow. There was something here, I knew it. Something patient, waiting, watching. I decided to move along, telling myself the figure would vanish if I didn't focus on it. Maybe it was better that way. My boots crunched against the frost again as I patrolled the northern path, passing the graves with names I almost remembered from old reports. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the earth itself resisted me. That's when I noticed another oddity, the shadows. Not the long, lazy stretches that moonlight casts, but deeper, darker, almost liquid patches that seemed to pulse with movement. They mirrored my own, but not exactly. There was a slight delay, a hesitation, like they were thinking. I stopped. My flashlight trembled. The wind carried a sound this time, soft and almost imperceptible, a shuffle like someone dragging feet just beyond the edge of the light. I squinted, trying to pierce the darkness, trying to tell my brain to name it something ordinary. I could feel the cold pressing against my skin, biting at my neck and wrists. And then, without warning, I heard breathing. Not mine, not on the radio. Right there. Sharp, shallow, deliberate. I spun, trying to find its source. Nothing. Panic wanted to rise, but I pushed it down. I told myself to stay calm, to keep moving, to finish the patrol and leave. But every time I tried to move, I felt watched, not like a passerby watching from a distance. Watched like a predator sizing up its prey. The thought made my stomach churn. My flashlight caught a figure again, just a blur behind a stone, too quick to see clearly. I strained to hold my gaze, but it was gone before I could focus. I started talking out loud, whispering, just to remind myself I was human, alive. "Who's there? Show yourself." My voice sounded strange, thin and small in the open night. No answer, just the wind rustling through the bare branches and the occasional crunch of leaves under my own boots. But I knew it wasn't the wind. I knew it wasn't me. I could feel it breathing with me now, a rhythm in the dark that matched mine, but slightly off, wrong. I kept walking faster now. Every headstone I passed seemed to twist in the corner of my eye, names I didn't recognize crawling across the marble like they were alive. My mind fought to explain it. Sleep deprivation, maybe. Stress. The monotony of walking the same paths night after night. But something had changed in this place tonight. Something I couldn't name. Something that made the familiar unfamiliar. Then I reached the old section. The stones here leaned at odd angles, broken by time. Moss covered names that had long been forgotten, and that's when I saw it clearly. A figure crouched low between two cracked stones. Not moving now, just watching. I froze, unable to breathe. The air felt heavier still, as if the night itself was pressing down on me. I couldn't see a face, only a shadow where it should have been. The kind of darkness that doesn't belong in nature. I swallowed hard. My radio crackled again, static dancing in my ears. I wanted to call for backup, to run, to do anything. But my legs felt rooted to the soil, my hands clutching the flashlight like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. The figure tilted its head slightly, curious maybe, or amused. I couldn't tell. And then, as if realizing I was watching too closely, it vanished. No footsteps, no rustle, just gone. I stood there a long time, trying to convince myself I imagined it. My breath came in short, shallow bursts, and my hands shook. The night was silent again, but not peaceful. Everything felt off, like the world had shifted and I was seeing cracks in the facade. I took a deep breath and forced myself to move. One step, then another, each footfall echoing louder than it should. By the time I finished that patrol loop, I was certain of one thing. This was no ordinary graveyard night. Something had been here, something watching, and I would have to face it again tomorrow. I didn't know what exactly, but I could feel it lingering in the shadows, waiting. And even if I never saw it clearly again, I knew it would always be there, just out of reach, moving in rhythm with the night, waiting for me to notice. I left the cemetery with my heart still racing, boots heavy with dirt and dread. The streetlights felt too bright, too warm. The hum of the city seemed intrusive, out of place. I wanted to forget, to tell myself it was a trick of light and fatigue. But I knew better. Whatever was in those graves, whatever had moved between those stones, it was real. And it was patient. I checked the radio one last time before I drove home. Dead air. No one to tell what I'd seen. No proof, just silence. And the certainty that when I returned, the night would be waiting for me. And it would be different. Because it already had begun, I told myself I wouldn't go back. Not tonight. Not ever, maybe. But the job doesn't care about fear. The radio might be silent, but the streets still needed patrolling, the cemeteries still needed watching. So I returned, flashlight in hand, boots scuffing against the frost, the same path I'd walked yesterday. The air was colder this time, sharper, as if it wanted to slice through my nerves before I even noticed. The cemetery gates loomed ahead, iron bars black against the moonlit sky. They always seemed imposing at night, but tonight they felt alive. A low groan of metal whispered in the wind. I stopped uneasy. Nothing was moving, yet the sound kept growing, stretching across the graveyard like a scream trying to escape. And then it happened. The heavy gates swung open violently with no push. No one behind them, only the sound of metal scraping stone and a hollow echo that crawled down my spine. I froze. My radio crackled, static buzzing like an insect trapped in a jar. "Hello?" I whispered. No answer. My breath fogged in the air. The gate swung once, twice, then settled with a heavy thunk. Nothing else. No footprints, no sign of who or what could have done it. I stepped closer, my boots crunching over frozen leaves, heart hammering in my chest. The ground beneath the gates was soft with damp soil, freshly disturbed. Footprints, human in shape, pressed deep into the dirt, but they ended abruptly, vanishing as if swallowed by the earth. I bent down to inspect them, flashlight illuminating the uneven impressions. They weren't mine. They didn't belong to anyone on staff, and yet the depth suggested a weight, deliberate steps. I ran my fingers over the soil, tracing the pattern, but the prints offered no clue, no direction, no sense of where the figure had gone. Only absence. My radio crackled again. Static, followed by a faint whisper. I tilted my head, listening closely. At first, it sounded like wind. Then, unmistakably, a voice, low, distant, calling a name I couldn't recognize. I froze. It wasn't one of the regular officers. Not anyone I'd heard before. The words twisted and faded before I could make sense of them. My stomach turned over. I wanted to run, to leave the cemetery forever, but some part of me couldn't. Some part of me needed to understand. I stepped through the gate, boots sinking slightly into soft earth. The smell hit me immediately. Wet soil, decaying leaves, something metallic I couldn't name. My flashlight scanned the rows of gravestones. Everything looked normal at first, but the longer I stared, the more I noticed details that weren't right. Stones tilted just a fraction too far, shadows that didn't match their objects, small scratches on the marble that hadn't been there before. And then I saw it. A shadow slipping between two graves. The same deliberate, careful movement I'd glimpsed last night. My heart skipped. I called out, voice trembling. "Who's there?" Silence. Only the wind brushing cold against my cheeks and the faint, persistent pulse of unease. The figure didn't appear again, but the feeling of being watched was heavier than ever. Every step I took echoed in the quiet, a reminder that I was intruding in a place that did not welcome visitors. I followed the disturbed soil along the path where the gate had swung. Every footprint vanished eventually, leaving nothing but smooth earth. I bent down, tracing the impressions with my fingertips, trying to make sense of them. My mind searched for logic. Maybe someone had been trespassing earlier, maybe it was animals digging, but nothing fit. The prints were too precise, too purposeful, too human, and they ended suddenly, as if the ground had swallowed them whole. A cold breeze swept through, rattling the gravestones and twisting my jacket around my waist. My flashlight flickered, and in that brief shadow of darkness, I thought I saw movement. I spun, catching a glimpse of someone or something standing beyond the oak trees. Tall, thin, impossible to focus on, as if it was made of smoke. I blinked and it vanished. The soil beneath my boots felt colder now, almost icy, as if the ground itself resented my intrusion. I pressed forward, following the faint trail of disturbance, though my logical mind screamed to leave. The cemetery stretched endlessly, the rows of gravestones like a labyrinth of memory and death. Every few steps the wind whispered against my ears. Sometimes it sounded like words, fragments of sentences I couldn't quite catch. I shook my head. The night plays tricks. That's what I told myself. That's what I had to tell myself. Then I saw something impossible. A headstone, new, freshly carved, lying flat as if it had just been placed. The name was blurred in my flashlight's beam. I crouched closer, trying to read it, heart racing. As I got closer, the letters became clear, though I had no memory of seeing this stone before. A name, followed by a date I didn't recognize. The date was recent. Too recent. My fingers trembled as I traced the carved letters. Something about it felt wrong. The edges of the marble seemed sharper than they should, the engraving too precise, too deliberate. I stepped back, stomach tightening. That's when I heard it. Soft, deliberate footsteps behind me. Not on leaves, not on soil, but on air itself, or at least it sounded that way. I spun, flashlight sweeping across the graveyard. Nothing. Only the shadows stretching into the night. My radio squawked again. A voice this time, clear, distorted, like it had been buried beneath static for decades. "Leave," it said. One word, but enough to twist my gut. I wanted to run. My legs wanted to move, but my body refused. I felt glued to the soil, rooted like one of the gravestones. Another sound joined the first, low, almost a growl, but not animal. The air vibrated with it, and then silence, the kind that presses against your ears, heavy and deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud, sharp, like it might burst through my chest. I tried to convince myself it was a prank, someone playing games with the old gates, maybe a neighbor with a twisted sense of humor. But deep down, I knew it wasn't human. The way the gate had moved, the vanishing footprints, the distorted voice, all of it pointed to something else. Something patient. Something that understood the night in ways I could never grasp. I took a shaky breath and continued down the path, scanning every shadow, every gravestone. The cemetery seemed larger than I remembered, the paths twisting and doubling back on themselves in impossible ways. I tried to follow the footprints, but they were gone now, replaced with smooth, untouched soil. The sense of being watched was suffocating, wrapping around me like wet cloth. Then I noticed a tree, old, gnarled, its roots twisted like claws gripping the earth. Beneath it, soil was upturned, forming a small mound. Something shifted just beyond it, movement so subtle I might have missed it if my nerves weren't already frayed. I stepped closer, flashlight trembling. The mound of earth shifted again, small indentations forming like footprints inside the soil itself. I swallowed hard. My pulse thundered in my ears. Something was here, something real, and it didn't want me to leave. I turned to check the gates again. They were still open, swinging slightly in the wind, but no one came through. No figure emerged. The graveyard remained silent, almost expectant, as if it knew I was there and enjoyed the fear it provoked. My radio squawked one last time before going dead. Static, then nothing. I was alone. Completely alone. I forced myself to finish the patrol, but every step felt heavier than the last. The cemetery seemed to stretch endlessly, each gravestone a reminder that time and death were intertwined in ways I would never understand. I imagined faces behind each stone, shadows leaning just out of sight, watching, listening, waiting. When I finally returned to the gates, I hesitated. The wind had died down. The graveyard looked ordinary again, almost serene under the faint glow of the moon. But I knew better. I could feel it in the way the soil felt underfoot, in the weight of the air pressing against my chest. I knew the cemetery had not forgiven me for entering tonight. Not yet. I walked through the gates, boots crunching over frost and leaves, and felt a cold grip on the back of my neck, like a whisper brushing my hair. I spun, heart hammering, flashlight sweeping the empty path. Nothing, only silence. But I could feel it, the gaze of something just beyond sight, waiting for the next night, the next patrol. I left the cemetery that night knowing something had changed. The gates weren't just iron and stone anymore. They had a memory, a purpose, and whatever had moved through them once could move again. Back in my car, I sat for a long moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, flashlight still in my lap. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of shadows, wind, fatigue, but deep down I knew the truth. The graveyard was alive and it had noticed me. And the gates had screamed for me, and I had answered. The night air was colder than I expected, sharper, as if it had been waiting for me. I gripped my flashlight tighter and switched on the radio just in case, though I already knew what awaited me. Silence. At first, I thought maybe the radio was dead again, just static and dead air like last night. But then it changed. A low hum, a background whisper that didn't belong. I froze. The cemetery felt different this time, more alive, more aware. My boots crunched against the frost-covered earth as I walked, flashlights sweeping across the gravestones. Shadows bent in ways that didn't match the light. Trees whispered among themselves with leaves that didn't stir in the wind. The hairs on the back of my neck stood straight up, and then the radio spoke. At first, just static, a faint buzz that made my teeth rattle. I adjusted the dial, trying to find the signal. That's when I heard it, a voice, low and distant, almost swallowed by the hiss. "Officer, help!" it said. I froze. My flashlight flickered. My heart pounded. That voice, it wasn't alive. Not now. It was old or maybe trapped in time. I whispered, "Who is it?" but the radio answered only with more static. Then more voices joined, overlapping and tangled, fragments of conversations. Some shouted, some whispered. I recognized them. Officers long gone, men and women I had read about in old police records. And their screams. God, their screams. The first scream came from a voice I knew. Officer Daniels missing 20 years ago. His voice crackled through the radio, desperate. "No, don't leave me." Then static swallowed him. My stomach twisted. I stumbled back a step, the frost crunching beneath my boots, but the sound kept coming. Not through the air, but through the radio, into my head, as if it knew exactly where I was. I tried to tell myself it was a technical glitch. Old recordings, interference. But I knew better. The voices were real. They were here, not somewhere else, listening, waiting. I moved slowly, flashlight sweeping over the graves. Shadows shifted with every step, too subtle to be real, but my eyes refused to look away. Another voice joined, overlapping Daniel's scream. A woman, Officer Hargrove. Her tone was flat, almost robotic. "He's not here, he's watching." Then static again. The voices weren't random. They had a rhythm, a message I couldn't fully comprehend, but one I knew was directed at me. I stopped walking. My radio buzzed and crackled. I pressed it to my chest, trying to find the clarity that would make sense of it all. And then I heard it clearly, a conversation from the past. Two officers decades ago discussing patrols in this very cemetery. Their voices were alive in a way that was impossible. The words weren't just sounds. They were memories, trapped and playing like a recording of someone else's nightmare. They were watching us again last night, one said. "Don't say that," the other replied, voice trembling. "They can hear you. I swear I saw something," the first whispered. Static swallowed the rest. I staggered. My flashlight swung wildly, illuminating gravestones I didn't remember seeing. Names blurred, dates shifted, shadows danced across letters that weren't right. The air was thick, heavier with each step. I realized the cemetery wasn't empty. It had never been empty. Every stone, every patch of soil, every whisper of wind carried memories. Carried them. And now it was using me. I tried to move forward, to finish my patrol, but every step brought new voices, new horrors. Old officers screaming, laughing, warning, begging. Their voices overlapped with mine, my own breathing, my heartbeat. I wanted to shout, to run, but the radio absorbed all my words and spat them back, distorted, unfamiliar, alien. A scream came from right behind me. My head whipped around, flashlight sweeping the shadows. Nothing, no one, only the earth, dark and silent. But I could feel the weight of unseen eyes pressing, judging. I pressed on, heart hammering, aware that every step was drawing me deeper into the cemetery's gaze. I reached a path lined with new graves, freshly dug, the soil dark and wet. My flashlight illuminated a figure crouched over one of them, barely visible. I couldn't tell if it was human or shadow, only that it moved with intent. And the radio crackled again. "Don't move," a voice whispered. A voice I had never heard, but one that sounded familiar. Like it knew me. Like it had been waiting. I swallowed hard, boots crunching in the frost, and my flashlight caught a fleeting glimpse. A face behind the shadows, pale, indistinct, watching. Then gone. I stumbled over a gravestone, heart in my throat, breath ragged. The radio screamed, 1,000 voices overlapping, old officers, lost souls, their cries filling my skull. I pressed it to my ear, desperate, terrified. "Listen," Daniels whispered, fading in and out. "They remember everything." And then the silence hit. I stood frozen, radio dead again, the cemetery eerily still. But I could feel it. The awareness, the weight of countless eyes, some of the living, most of the dead, listening, waiting. And I knew, even without a voice telling me, that leaving wasn't an option. Not tonight. Not ever, maybe. I tried to keep moving, flashlight shaking in my grip. Shadows clung to every stone, every tree, twisting in ways that weren't natural. The air smelled of decay and cold metal. I realized then that the cemetery itself was speaking, but not in words. In vibrations, in pressure, in the pulse of the earth beneath my boots. It remembered all who had walked here, all who had fallen, and now it remembered me. Another voice broke through the static, faint but distinct. "He sees you," it said, a warning. I froze, gripping the flashlight like it could save me. The words were not just sounds. They were carved into the night, a message that pressed against my mind. I ran. My boots tore through frost and soil as I followed the winding paths, trying to escape, though I knew escape was impossible. Every step echoed too loudly, every shadow reached toward me. The voices screamed in my ears, mingling with my own fear, until I could barely distinguish one from the other. Then I stopped. In the center of the cemetery, an old fountain, broken, cracked, water long dried away. Shadows pooled there unnaturally, bending like liquid. And in that darkness, a figure emerged. Not running, not hiding, just standing, watching, waiting. The radio in my hand crackled violently, spitting out voices I had never heard before. Officers from decades past, some screaming, some whispering, all calling out my name. I raised my flashlight, trembling. The figure didn't move, didn't respond, and then a whisper through the radio. "You are next." My stomach lurched. I wanted to drop everything, run, scream, but my feet wouldn't obey. My legs felt like stone, glued to the earth, as if the cemetery itself refused to let me leave. The air was heavy, suffocating, full of unseen pressure. Every breath was a struggle, every heartbeat a drum in a tomb. I understood then what the voices meant. The dead weren't just remembering, they were recording. Every patrol, every officer, every step taken in this place became part of the cemetery's memory. And now the cemetery was remembering me. Every fear, every hesitation, every breath I took in this place was etched into its awareness. The figure stepped forward, or maybe I imagined it. The radio screamed again, voices overlapping, incoherent yet unmistakable. "Do not leave! Do not forget. He watches." I wanted to scream, but my voice failed. I wanted to move, but my legs betrayed me. I wanted to fight, but there was nothing to fight. Only the weight of unseen eyes, the pressure of time pressing down, the memory of those long gone, and the certainty that the cemetery itself had noticed me and would not let me go. Hours, minutes, seconds, I couldn't tell which, passed. The voices faded slowly, leaving only the hum of the radio static, a low, vibrating pulse in my skull. I staggered back, boots slipping in frozen mud, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The cemetery was silent again, but the silence was heavier than the screams. It pressed against my ears, my chest, my mind. I knew it was listening, always listening. When I finally left the radio dead once more, I didn't look back. I couldn't. The memory of voices, of screaming officers, of the weight of eyes that had watched me would stay with me forever. And I knew, even as I drove away, that the cemetery had recorded me, that it remembered, that it would wait, and that the voices were not done, not yet. I don't remember when the air got heavier, when the shadows began to lean closer, or when the ground beneath my feet stopped feeling like the earth I knew. One moment I was just walking through the gate, expecting cold stones and the smell of wet grass. And the next, it was like the cemetery had noticed me, like it had been waiting. I shouldn't have come back. I knew that. But something in me, some part I didn't recognize, pushed me through the wrought iron gate into the rows of gravestones that jutted from the earth like crooked teeth. The fog was thick, heavier than any morning mist I'd ever seen, and it clung to my legs, dragging at my shoes. I felt it crawling up, trying to press me into the ground. I shook my head and tried to breathe normally. That's what you do, right? Just breathe. But the fog, it wasn't just fog. It wasn't air. It felt alive. The gravestones were all different ages, different shapes, and each one seemed to carry its own story. But the way they sat there, upright and silent, watching, it was like they were waiting to see if I'd survive the visit. I walked slower, almost sliding my feet instead of stepping, because any sudden movement seemed like it would draw attention. And I started noticing little things. A sound, barely there, like someone dragging a shoe across stone. A shadow that didn't belong to any tree or stone. I told myself it was just the wind. I always tell myself that, but the wind didn't whisper. The wind didn't lean against me, brushing cold fingers along the back of my neck. I felt eyes on me. Not the eyes of birds or stray cats. They were heavier, patient, watching. And then I noticed something else. The dead weren't still. At first it was tiny movements. A leaf falling, a branch bending. But soon I could swear the shadows of the gravestones were shifting. A tilt here, a lean there. Almost like the stones were bending just slightly toward me. I stopped in my tracks. My chest tightened. I told myself I was imagining it. It was impossible. Stones don't move. They don't breathe. They don't watch you like this. But they were watching. I tried to remember why I had come here, to focus on something concrete. A name, a date, anything that would ground me in reality. And there it was, a grave I didn't expect to see. My father's. The stone was old, the engraving barely readable through the lichen and cracks, but it was unmistakable. I wanted to touch it, to press my palm against it, and feel something solid, something familiar. When I did, the ground beneath my hand felt wrong. Cold, but not cold like marble. Cold like the inside of a coffin, damp and swallowing. My fingers trembled. And then I heard it. A soft, low hum. Almost like breathing. Not mine. Not anyone else's I could identify. But something alive. I pulled my hand back as if I'd been burned. The hum grew louder. Then, faintly at first, a voice. I couldn't make out words. It was not in any language I knew, but it was speaking to me. Calling me. Mocking me. And as I listened, I realized that every gravestone in the row seemed to hum with its own low voice. Together, they formed a chorus that pressed against my skull. I stumbled back, trying to cover my ears, but the sound didn't go away. It wasn't just sound, it was thought, pressure, intention. I ran. The path twisted, though I could swear I had been walking straight. Each step brought more whispers, more shuffling. Not leaves, not wind. Footsteps. Behind me, always behind me. I didn't look back. I couldn't, but I could feel them. I could feel hundreds of eyes tracking, pressing, burning into my back. The cemetery was alive, and it knew I was here. I came to a clearing, a circle of graves older than anything I'd seen. Moss covered every stone, and the roots of trees had lifted some so they leaned like ancient, tired heads. I collapsed to my knees. My hands scraped the dirt as I tried to catch my breath. And then I saw them. Shadows that shouldn't exist. They weren't human. Not fully. But they moved among the stones like guardians or hunters. They paused when they saw me. And then they began to follow. I crawled forward, dragging my hands through mud and weeds. Every sound seemed amplified. A crow cried somewhere far away. But it echoed like it was right beside me. And the dead. They were everywhere now. I could feel the pull of the soil, the weight of their gaze, and I realized I wasn't moving through a cemetery. I was moving through their world, and it had just noticed a new intruder. I tried to think logically, step by step. Find the edge, find the gate, escape! But the clearing seemed endless. Gravestones twisted into impossible angles. The trees formed a canopy so thick that even the moonlight couldn't reach me. And all the while, the whispers followed. Words I couldn't understand pressed into my mind. Names, dates, confessions, regrets. I began to hear laughter. Not human laughter. Dry, brittle, scratching at the inside of my skull. I stopped moving. I tried to focus on my own breathing. 1, 2, 1, 2. But even that was wrong. My heartbeat sounded too loud. A drum in the silent orchestra of the dead. And then I realized I could hear my own thoughts echoing back at me, but they weren't my thoughts anymore. They were reflections. Twisted versions. The cemetery wasn't just watching. It was reading me. Folding me into itself. I staggered backward and hit a stone. My head bounced off the cold surface, and for a moment, everything went black. When I opened my eyes, the stone looked different. Alive. The name on it shifted under my gaze. Letters crawling like worms. I screamed. My voice was swallowed instantly by the fog. The cemetery didn't respond to noise. It responded to presence, to fear, to thought, and it liked what it sensed in me. I ran again, blindly, until I tripped and fell into a patch of dirt so soft it felt like sinking. I pressed my face into it. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to become nothing so they would leave me alone. But the soil wasn't comforting. It was the opposite. Warm, breathing, waiting. Roots tangled around my fingers, small, nimble like they wanted to keep me there. I struggled. My arms flailed. And then I saw a hand. Not my own. Pale, thin, and impossibly long, reaching through the mist toward me. I scrambled backward. My mind screamed for logic, for reality, or anything. And then I saw the eyes, thousands of them. Not just in the stones, not just in the shadows, but everywhere. In the fog, in the mud, in the trees, watching me, waiting, judging. And I understood something terrifying. The dead weren't dead. Not really, not here. They existed in some other layer of the world, a layer that only opened when someone like me wandered too close. And now I had wandered too close. I remember stopping. I can't forget that moment. I dropped to my knees in the mud, shaking, gasping, and staring at the endless eyes. And then the whispering stopped. The footsteps stopped. The fog pressed in close, and there was a silence so absolute I could hear my own blood moving. And in that silence, I heard it clearly. My name, my real name, spoken by something that had never been alive. Something that belonged to the cemetery. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. I wanted to scream, but the sound refused to come. All I could do was listen. And it told me things. Secrets I had buried. Regrets I hadn't yet faced. Memories I had tried to forget. I realized then that the cemetery didn't just trap the living in its walls, it trapped them in themselves. In their own fear, their own guilt, their own shame. And if you stayed too long, if you let it, it would consume you. I didn't understand how I knew it was true. I only knew that I had to leave. Somehow before it decided I belonged here. I staggered to my feet. The gravestones leaned farther, pressing toward me like the air itself was trying to stop me. I stumbled forward toward a path I barely recognized. The shadows followed, but they didn't chase me yet. They were patient. They knew I had nowhere else to go. I don't remember how long I ran. Time had lost all meaning. Every step took me deeper into the cemetery and yet somehow closer to the exit. But it wasn't freedom. It was a lure. The dead, they knew my mind. They knew what I feared most. And they used it, stretching the path, bending reality until every tree, every stone, every whisper felt alive. Finally, the fog thinned. The gate came into view. The iron was cold and solid under my fingers. I pulled it open and stumbled into the street beyond. The city smelled like asphalt and gasoline, like reality. My lungs burned with the air. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might shatter my chest. And I didn't look back, not once. But I know the cemetery hasn't forgotten me. I can feel it in quiet moments when the wind brushes against my neck or a shadow falls just slightly wrong. I hear whispers, faint, almost drowned out by the world, names, dates, secrets, and sometimes, late at night, I dream I'm back there, on my knees in the mud, staring at thousands of eyes that know everything about me, and I realize the truth I've been trying to ignore. The cemetery doesn't just watch. It waits, and I am still inside its gaze. The phone rang at midnight, and I could already feel the weight of it in my chest before I even picked it up. There's something about a call at this hour that makes your stomach tighten. You know deep down that it's never good. I rubbed my eyes and fished the receiver off the cradle, expecting some drunk kid screwing around, some prank that I'd have to record in the log and laugh off in the morning. Hello? My voice sounded hoarse, too loud in the silence of the empty station. The line crackled, and for a moment, there was nothing. Then a whisper. Just a soft, trembling sound, like someone trying to speak through water. Under the stones. I froze. My hand gripped the receiver tighter. Who's this? Silence, and then faintly the words again. Under the stones. I could hear it, even over the static, like it was coming from right behind me. I laughed, though it felt hollow, strained. Very funny, I said. You've got me up at midnight with some graveyard prank? Nothing. Just that faint, unplaceable hiss. I scribbled down the call, made a note in the log, and shrugged it off. Probably some teenager playing with audio filters or a drunk with a bad sense of humor. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't a joke. There was something wrong about that voice. It didn't belong to anyone living, or at least that's what my mind kept screaming. I tried to return to paperwork, the hum of the fluorescent lights in the station filling the space around me. But the whispers lingered, curling at the edge of my hearing. I could almost hear them beneath the sound of the pen scratching across the report forms. Under the stones. Under the stones. I went to make coffee, the bitter aroma grounding me a little. I told myself that it was just stress. Night shifts have a way of playing tricks on your mind. Shadows stretch in ways they shouldn't. Sounds echo where there's nothing to echo from. I dealt with the drunk and the despairing, the lost and the violent, but this felt different. Cold, patient, waiting. Another call came in around midnight. Same whisper, same trembling tone. Under the stones. I didn't even bother asking who it was this time. I simply hung up. A trick. A loop of some kind. I convinced myself of it. But that whisper had already burrowed into the corners of my mind, whispering while I tried to sleep in the chair at my desk, making my skin crawl like tiny spiders were crawling just beneath the surface. By 1 a.m., I was restless. Coffee forgotten, pen set down, I found myself staring at the window at the cemetery across the street. Headstones stood like jagged teeth, cold and pale under the dim streetlights. I'd patrolled there dozens of times, in daylight, in storms, in snow. Never had it looked like this. At night, the place didn't feel like land. It felt suspended, like it was breathing, waiting. I told myself to turn away, to retreat back to my office and call it a night. But the whispers were louder now, or maybe I was hearing them more clearly. A soft echo, almost indistinct, like someone calling your name just at the edge of hearing. Under the stones. Under the stones. I grabbed my coat. It wasn't protocol. I wasn't supposed to be wandering off at night alone. But the pull of it, the compulsion to see, was too strong. Each step toward the cemetery seemed heavier than the last. The cold night air hit my face like a slap, but it cleared my thoughts in a way that was almost violent. I could hear the whispers more distinctly now, weaving between the crunch of gravel underfoot. I passed the first row of tombstones. I could feel the silence pressing against my ears, the way the shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally around the monuments. My flashlight cut through the dark, illuminating mossy names and cracked stones. It felt absurdly quiet, like the world itself was holding its breath. And then I heard it clearly. Not a whisper this time, but a soft, persistent murmuring coming from directly beneath a gravestone marked with a weathered name I didn't recognize. It was like a voice caught in the soil, muffled and trembling. I knelt beside the stone, the cold biting through my gloves. My heart was hammering in my chest. But some part of me, maybe the part that had always chased the impossible, needed to hear it clearly. I leaned closer, the dirt damp and cold against my palms. The whisper didn't pause. Under the stones. It was pleading. Not like a threat, not like someone taunting me, more like a call for help. From a place that didn't belong to the living, I wanted to step back, to run, to dismiss it. But I couldn't. The words wrapped around my mind. Insistent, almost intimate, like the grave itself was aware of me, waiting for me to acknowledge it. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was wind or rats or the echoing of my own imagination, but the sound was too deliberate, too present. I could feel it in my bones, vibrating through the soles of my feet and up into my chest. I stood slowly, trying to steady my breath. My flashlight trembled in my hand, and then, as if the night had been waiting for permission, the whispers shifted, closer, surrounding me. Not from one grave, but many. Under the stones? Under the stones. I stumbled back, my mind scrambling for rationality. I told myself it was acoustics, the way sound travels through headstones, that the mind plays tricks in fear. But the sense of being watched, of being understood by something hidden beneath the earth, wouldn't leave. I took a step backward, another, and the murmuring seemed to follow. Each stone seemed to vibrate with the faint pressure of voices pressing against my awareness. I wanted to run, but my legs refused, stiff and unwilling. Then I heard something new, a soft scrape, like nails on soil, faint but unmistakable. A rhythm beneath the whispering, slow and persistent. I froze, every nerve screaming at me to move, but my body refused to obey. My flashlight quivered as I directed it toward the sound. Nothing, just graves, just darkness. My rational mind was screaming, telling me this was impossible, that I was alone, that I was hallucinating. But the whispers, The whispers said otherwise. Finally, I tore my gaze from the gravestones and ran back toward the street. Cold air lashed against my face, the murmuring fading into the distance, but never fully gone. I could still hear it, faintly, like a shadow behind my thoughts. Under the stones. Under the stones. Back in the station, the normal hum of fluorescent lights felt like a cage, like the world itself had returned, but something had slipped in and left its mark. I logged the calls, wrote the report, but my hands were shaking. I couldn't explain it, not without sounding insane. I tried to sleep in the chair, but every time I closed my eyes, the whispers returned, curling around my skull, pressing against my ears. Under the stones? Morning came, pale and gray. I sat at my desk, coffee cooling beside me, staring at the cemetery across the street. In the daylight, it looked ordinary again, just stones and grass and long shadows. But I knew better. I had heard it. I had felt it. And the voice was patient, waiting. By the time the sun rose fully, I was already planning to go back. Not as a prank, not as a patrol, but to listen, to understand, to see what was buried beneath the stones. Because whatever it wasn't done speaking, and I knew, deep down, that some things waiting beneath the earth should never be spoken to. But I couldn't stop myself from listening. I returned to the cemetery that night, long after the sun had sunk and the shadows had swallowed every familiar shape. The streetlights blinked weakly in the distance, doing little to pierce the thick darkness that pooled between the stones. My flashlight felt inadequate in my hand, the beam cutting only a narrow tunnel through the black. Still, I walked, each step cautious, each crunch of gravel sounding far too loud in the oppressive quiet. The whispers were gone, at least at first. I told myself that absence was relief, but relief was temporary. The air hung heavy, like it had been holding its breath for days, waiting, and I could feel it. Something beneath the earth, aware of me, lingering. I stopped at the row of graves I had seen the night before. The stones were damp with dew, their carved names unreadable in the dark. And there it was, a freshly turned patch of soil that hadn't been there in daylight. My stomach dropped. I hadn't noticed it before. No flowers, no markers, nothing except the irregular mound of dark earth. I crouched, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The soil was soft and cold, disturbed recently. Footprints, small, narrow, led up to the grave and then vanished, just ended. No trail beyond the edge of the mound. My pulse picked up. Footprints that led nowhere meant one of two things. Someone had slipped into the shadows or something had emerged from the earth itself. I knelt closer, the smell of damp dirt rising like decay. My fingers brushed against the top of the grave. The soil felt oddly warm, almost alive, as if it were still breathing. And then I heard it, a low, faint echo like a voice carried through thick walls. "Help me." It was so soft I nearly doubted I'd heard it. But then again, I had heard it. The words trembled through the air like ripples on water, barely audible but impossible to ignore. They weren't coming from above ground, not from the nearby trees or the wind. They were coming from beneath. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing. Logic screamed at me to leave, to call it in, to retreat to the warmth and light of the patrol car. But my curiosity, my compulsion, kept me rooted. Some part of me knew that if I turned away, I might never hear it again. I traced the edge of the freshly dug grave, flashlight sweeping over the disturbed earth. There were no tools, no footprints leading to a nearby shed, nothing to explain this sudden mound. It was as if the earth had moved itself. Then the whispering grew, no longer contained. It seemed to swirl around me, threading through the stones, pressing against the edges of my mind. "Help! Me! Help! Me!" I backed away instinctively, heart hammering, and that's when I noticed the shovel, leaning upright against a gravestone a few meters away, its metal blade glinting in the weak light. I hadn't seen it before. It wasn't marked with blood or anything obviously sinister, but the ground around it was trampled, footprints pressed deep into the soil. I reached for it hesitantly. The handle was cold and rough, the weight heavier than I expected. Something about holding it made the whispers sharpen, as if the earth itself had sensed my intent. "Under the stones?" I tried to dig. Not deep, just enough to inspect. My hands wrapped around the shovel, muscles straining against the wet soil. With each scoop, the whispers grew louder, more urgent, threading into words I almost understood. Pleas, fragmented and desperate, carried through the dirt. Don't leave! Don't leave! The grave resisted me, though. Every shovelful felt heavier than it should, as if the soil had weight beyond the physical. It was wrong. It was alive. My rational mind tried to anchor me. Graves settle, soil compacts, but I couldn't shake the sense of something pressing back, resisting, waiting. I dug until my arms burned and sweat stung my eyes. The flashlight shook in my hand, and then I saw it. Something dark, slick, half hidden beneath the soil. A glint of metal, bone? My stomach turned. I couldn't tell. I leaned closer. The smell of damp earth and decay thick in my nostrils, my ears straining to catch any sound other than my own ragged breathing. And that's when the ground beneath me shifted. Just slightly, barely perceptible, but enough to make me freeze. The whispers intensified, sharper now, almost urgent, echoing directly beneath my feet. Help! Me! Help! Me! I stumbled back, heart racing, breathing harsh and uneven. The shovel slipped from my grip, clanging against the stone. And when it hit, the whispering stopped. Silence. For a moment I felt relief. I convinced myself that whatever had been under there, whatever had been calling, had retreated. But then I noticed the footprints again. They hadn't disappeared. They circled the grave, leading nowhere, as if the earth itself had left them behind. My flashlight beam followed the prints, but they ended at nothing. Nothing but darkness and cold. I crouched again, almost against my will, and traced the edges of the grave with my fingers. The soil was cool now, but there was an impression, something like a handprint pressed into the earth. Not mine, not human, too small to be adult, too delicate to belong to any animal I knew. I pressed my palm against it. It sank slightly under my touch. I jerked back as if burned, my mind screaming with the awareness that this shouldn't exist, that it couldn't exist. But it did, and then I heard it again. Not the whisper, but a sound beneath it. A soft scraping, rhythmic and deliberate, coming from deep under the grave. My breath caught in my throat. Whoever, or whatever, was down there was moving, alive, struggling, and the whispers were a plea. Help me, please. I stumbled backward, tripping over a root, almost dropping the flashlight. Shadows danced across the stones, long and unnatural, stretching in ways my eyes couldn't trust. Every rational thought was screaming at me to leave, to get out, to run. But my feet refused to obey fully. Something compelled me to stay, to watch, to listen. I tried calling it in, radio, backup, but no words came out. Only the sound of my own pulse in my ears, the faint scraping, and the whispers that refused to be silenced. Under the stones. Minutes, or maybe hours, it was impossible to tell, passed. I sat against a headstone, knees pulled to my chest, flashlight angled at the grave. The air was damp and heavy, pressing against my skin. The whispers had softened, but didn't disappear. Every now and then, the scrape would return, faint but deliberate, as if testing the limits of the earth that confined it. Eventually, I got to my feet, shaking, numb, and forced myself to leave. I glanced back at the grave one last time. The footprints remained, the soil slightly disturbed, as if the earth was still breathing, still alive. And in the faintest edge of my mind, I could still hear the soft echo of that voice. Help me. Back at the station, I tried to rationalize everything. Maybe a trapped animal, a trick of sound, a fallen branch scraping against a stone. But logic felt thin, like paper soaked in water. Something unnatural had been there. I had seen the traces, felt the weight, heard the pleading. I couldn't sleep. The scrape, the whisper, the footprints, they were all etched into my mind. I kept seeing the handprint in the soil, delicate, impossible, reaching up like a silent scream. And the thought that someone, or something, was trapped beneath the earth, still calling, didn't let me rest. By dawn, I was already planning. I couldn't leave it be. I needed to know what or who was under that grave. I didn't fully understand why. Fear, curiosity, duty, some mix of all three. But deep down, I knew the whispers wouldn't stop. Not until I found out what was buried under the stones, and I was afraid. Not just of what I might find, but of how far I was willing to go to uncover it. The night had stretched longer than I thought possible. My mind refused rest, circling over the grave I had left behind. Every time I closed my eyes, the whispers returned, curling around my skull like smoke, insistent and patient. Under the stones! Under the stones! By the time the first gray light of dawn touched the horizon, I was already at the cemetery, keys in hand, flashlight slung awkwardly over my shoulder. The air was damp, thick with the scent of wet earth, and the shadows of the headstones reached long fingers across the grass. The night had left the place eerily still, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for me. The grave, the disturbed mound of soil, the footprint trail that ended at nothing. I approached slowly, heart hammering in my chest, every nerve alert. My hands shook as I brushed the dew from the top of the soil. And that's when I saw it. The surface of the grave had shifted again. Faint, uneven depressions marked the earth, forming shapes that weren't quite human. My stomach dropped. I knelt and ran my hands over the soil, feeling the subtle warmth beneath my fingers. Alive. Still alive. A whisper rose from below, stronger than ever, clearer. Not just a voice, but multiple voices, overlapping, echoing beneath the surface. Help. Please. Trapped under stones. I swallowed hard. My hands dug in, shovelful by shovelful, breaking the cold crust of soil, revealing layers beneath that pulsed faintly, almost as if the earth itself was breathing. The whispers grew louder, urgent, pleading, and I realized something. This wasn't an animal. It wasn't a prank. It was human, or something that had been human once. Then I saw the first piece of evidence. A hand, pale, thin, pressed just beneath the surface. The soil had been hiding it, but now the fingers curled slightly as if trying to reach me. I froze. The voice intensified, almost desperate. Help! Help! Me. I didn't move at first, paralyzed. My rational mind screamed at me to step back, to call for backup, to forget it entirely. But I couldn't. The human part of me, the part trained to protect, to investigate, to bear witness, overpowered fear. I grabbed the shovel, bracing myself. Each scoop revealed more. The arm, the shoulder, the chest, all buried shallowly, as if someone had tried to hide them in haste or panic. There was no coffin, no marking. Just earth piled over what had been trapped and calling for help. The whispers now mingled with gasps, faint and trembling, as if the body beneath the ground still remembered how to breathe. My stomach churned. I stepped back, the shovel slipping from my hands. This wasn't just a grave. This was a prison. Someone, or something, had been trapped beneath the soil, left to struggle and call into the darkness. My heart pounded as the implications set in. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't accidental, and then I noticed the footprints again. Not around the grave this time, but pressed into the damp earth leading away from it. Small, childlike, irregular. They didn't lead anywhere visible, vanishing suddenly into the soil as if swallowed by the earth itself. I could feel a pull toward them, magnetic and unrelenting, like the whispers were dragging me across the grass, forcing me to follow. I dropped to my knees, brushing my fingers over the impressions. The air grew colder. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, frantic. Help! Don't leave! Trapped under stones. I realized then that it wasn't just one voice. It was many. Layers of voices, echoes of struggle, decades perhaps, all pressed beneath the cemetery in shallow graves that the eye could never see. And I had been listening to them, unknowingly drawn to the surface, to the one grave that spoke the clearest. My flashlight flickered. I looked around. The cemetery, once still, now seemed subtly alive. Shadows shifted in unnatural ways. The headstones leaned slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if they were listening. The soil beneath my hands trembled faintly, tiny vibrations that matched the whispered pleas. I had to know. I had to see. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but I could feel the pull of the trapped, and my body obeyed it against reason. I started digging more deliberately, each shovelful revealing fragments. A shoe, a tangle of clothing, Soil pressed oddly, as if resisting removal. And then I saw the face. Pale, half covered in dirt, eyes wide and staring, fixed on nothing yet somehow seeing everything. The whispers rose in intensity, desperate now, overlapping with soft cries that sounded almost human, almost familiar. I couldn't speak. My hands froze on the shovel handle. I realized the truth in a horrifying instant. This wasn't a recent crime. This wasn't a one-time event. This was systematic, a layering of buried souls over years, decades perhaps, all forgotten, all calling from beneath the stones. The whispers turned into words I could finally understand, fragments that pierced my mind directly. Trapped, not safe, must help, please. My stomach turned. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. My hands dug deeper, my heart hammering, as if my body understood the urgency better than my mind. Every shovelful of soil revealed more. A hand here, a shoe there, a fragment of fabric pressed with invisible force. And all the while the whispers pulled, insistent, almost commanding, urging me to keep uncovering, keep revealing. It was then I realized something even darker. Whatever or whoever was under the cemetery had been left intentionally, trapped under stone, earth, silence. Not hidden for safety, but hidden to be forgotten. And now that I was here, listening, touching, digging, I was part of it. The first rays of dawn crept over the horizon, pale light washing the cemetery in gray. The whispers softened, almost as if the light soothed them slightly. But they did not stop. They layered on top of each other, fading only to grow again, deeper, insistent. Help. Don't leave. Buried, under stones. I could see it clearly now. A shallow pit, barely a grave, earth pressed tight over something alive or recently alive. A body or many bodies. And in the middle, a hand, thin and pale, reaching. My heart raced, fear and compulsion intertwining, gripping me like a vice. I wanted to call it in. I wanted backup, evidence, procedure. But the whispers would not wait. They would not forgive my hesitation. They demanded attention, demanded action. I dug faster, my arms burning, soil scattering across my clothes, heart hammering in sync with the trembling earth. And then I heard it clearly, distinctly, above the murmuring a voice, not fractured, not echoing, but singular and full of fear and memory. Please, help me. Don't leave me under the stones. I froze, my breath caught. That voice was familiar, human, trembling. My rational mind couldn't process it, but instinct screamed that it was alive, struggling. I had to reach it, had to know it was real. With trembling hands, I cleared the final layer of soil. The hand pressed upward once more, desperate, and I saw the face fully now. Eyes wide, pupils dilated, mouth open in a silent scream, but alive. Something beneath the earth, barely alive, had survived, and it looked at me with an intensity that rooted me to the spot. The weight of decades of entrapment pressing down through my consciousness. I grabbed the hand, pulling gently. Skin was cold, fragile, but alive. The whispers slowed, softened into murmurs of relief, as if the act of recognition, the act of acknowledging their existence, eased some of the ancient pain. Thank you? Thank you. The sun rose fully, illuminating the cemetery. Shadows retreated. I was exhausted, trembling, drenched in sweat and dirt. But the hand in mine was real. Flesh and warmth. Alive. Somehow alive. I realized then that the cemetery was not simply a resting place. It was a threshold, a place where some cries never ended. Where the earth held memory and trauma, and sometimes, just sometimes, someone answered. I had answered. But as I sat there, watching the gray light spread over the stones, I knew one thing with certainty. Some secrets buried beneath the earth refuse to stay buried forever. And some whispers never stop calling no matter how long you wait. And somewhere, deep beneath other stones, other graves, other forgotten whispers, there were more waiting, watching, hoping someone would listen. I didn't know if I was ready for the rest of them. But I had to be, because now I knew the cemetery wasn't quiet. It never was. It just waited.